Okay.
Yeah.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. We do expect a full complement, but let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. We're going to call this meeting of the General Policy Committee to order, January 23rd, 2020. First General Policy meeting of the decade. I'm going to quit saying that, like after some point. I'm almost done, yeah, there's not many more meetings. And we'd like to welcome you all to our new and improved Roberta Carlisle conference room, just a little bit more space and a little bit more functional, and we are streaming live as well. And so that's a nice improvement so people can watch us at home in real time. So our first order of business is adoption of the agenda. Motion and a second to adopt our agenda. Any members of the public speak to the motion? Back to the commission. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Next order of business is approval of the January 9th General Policy Committee meeting minutes. Any corrections, or is there a motion to approve? Second. Motion and a second to approve. Any members of the public? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? That motion passes unanimously as well. So our first discussion item for today is an item to look at creating an independent ethics review and training board. We have a presentation on that, and then we have Mr. Bannon, the Executive Director of the Palm Beach County Commission on Ethics, with us. We're so glad that you joined us today, and we'll hear about his personal experience over the last, what I found out was almost a decade since its inception, and be available to answer questions as well based on his experience. So we'll look forward to that and thank you for that. So with that, I'll turn it over to y'all and let you do the presentation, and then we'll take it from there.
We'll actually ask if Commissioner Ward wanted to open.
Commissioner Ward, would you like to?
Or we can.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I asked for our policy folks to take a look at this and do some research. I also did some research. I've talked with folks from Tallahassee, both members of their board and members of their city commission. And I'm very interested in seeing how we might be able to put this sort of thing together for Gainesville. I have heard from charter officers, former charter officers, and from county commissioners that we don't need an ethics board because everything's fine. That's all well and good, but things may not always be fine. And it would be good to have a resource like this available to us, I believe, for the community and for us to ask questions of. So I'm interested to see what is out there and hear from you all on the concept. Thank you.
Thank you. And real quick before we get going here, I'm just curious, how is the sound back there? Raul, how are you in the very back?
We have speakers back here.
Okay, so everybody can hear okay and follow? Fantastic. All right, that makes me very happy. All right, Ms. Hoffman.
Before Sophia jumps in, I'd just like to remind the Commission where we are in the scope of our policy process. So in our 6-phase policy process, we're only straddling phases 1 and 2 right now. These are very preliminary conversations that we're having. My team, Sophia, has done a great deal of research into this topic, this idea that was presented by the Commissioner. And so really the purpose of today's conversation is to give the Commission a baseline education in some foundational concepts in this idea and decide whether you as a body would be interested in pursuing it further. So really the decisions being made today are whether this is something you'd like to get more information about. So we're still very early in the conversation, and I just wanted to throw that reminder out there, and we'll have another reminder on it toward the end. But now I'd like to introduce our fellow, Sophia Corrugetto, who will walk us through her research into this concept.
Awesome. Hi everyone, I'm Sophia Corrugetto, and I'll be talking to you all today a bit about commission ethics and guidelines. So in general, while there is currently a code of ethics in Florida state statutes, many cities and counties choose to take the extra step in establishing a code of ethics that goes a bit more in depth into policies and procedures that are applicable to that jurisdiction. And so this code can then act as a set of standards and guidelines for local elected officials and city employees to refer to and abide by in their time with the city or county. So to begin, I'll give you guys some local context to have an idea of where we are on the topic. So the state of Florida currently has a code of ethics for public officers and employees in its state statutes. And this code outlines standards of conduct, rules and options for ethics training, and the bylaws for a commission on ethics. That commission is currently the body that hears any ethics violations that are happening here in Gainesville at any time. And Alachua County and the city of Gainesville currently enforce existing statewide codes of ethics. And so neither jurisdiction has its own local code of ethics that pertains to public elected officials. And so they do not have a body to administer it, such as an inspector general or a board of ethics. Gainesville currently utilizes draft guidelines. I'm sorry, I'm speaking straight. Okay. Currently utilizes draft guidelines for elected officials, but as I said before, there is no established code of ethics. However, in the human resources policies right now, number G-2 is titled Code of Ethics Standards. But this code is intended to apply to city employees and includes sections on fair and equal treatment, the use of city resources, and contracts with the city. And so to administer ethics-related issues, there are currently 2 charters in our city that fall into that category. They are the city internal auditor, and this position is tasked with performing financial and compliance audits, as well as the implementation of the city's human relations and equal opportunity ordinance. And then there's the city's equal opportunity director, and this person investigates complaints of discrimination, harassment, retaliation, and so forth. So to get a better visual of, okay. Well, no, we're good. Okay. So to understand why the city may want to pursue establishing a code of ethics, a couple factors should be considered. The first is that we don't have an established code in place. So we currently hear the city reference the state code at any time an ethics issue comes up. And a code of ethics would offer city employees and public officials some standards by which to be held accountable and act as a document that they can reference as needed. Additionally, a person or board would need to administer it. And currently, public officials must reach out to staff at the State Commission on Ethics with questions or concerns, and this may be a lengthy process given the amount of municipalities currently using the State Commission on Ethics as a resource. So a local person or board would be tasked with hearing any local cases as opposed to the state, and we would have a resource here who could answer questions and provide recommendations as applicable. Okay, so to get a better visual on where our jurisdictions in Florida stand, there are 2 counties in the state that have a code of ethics and a commission on ethics. So the city of Boca Raton is within Palm Beach County, and so they have a code of ethics, and any violations there are heard by the county's commission on ethics. And the same goes for Coral Springs; they have a code, but Broward County has a commission on ethics. So anytime an issue comes up in Coral Springs, that issue is referred to Broward County Commission on Ethics. But the city of Coral Springs can still refer to their code for any reference. And then some other cities in Florida include Jacksonville and Tallahassee that have a code of ethics and a board of ethics to administer it. So some components of a code of ethics. So after performing research on various jurisdictions with a code, the following sections and their details were common throughout each one. So the first is the disclosure of interest. So essentially, commissioners must file a statement of interest upon election and disclose personal interests before a vote to avoid conflict. The next is political activity. So no elected official should use city resources to engage in political activity or promise any appointment or favor or actively try to influence the campaign of someone seeking elective office. The next is standards of conduct. So that no public officer may use their position or office to obtain any advantage or privilege. No officer may give an incumbent or anything of value that could influence any official action or judgment, provided any given exceptions. And they may not disclose information gained by their position. And then penalties and violations. So the code will typically be enforced by the city or county commission on ethics. So any violations are heard by them, and then they will deem the actions necessary. So right now, the state commission on ethics hears any cases when no local ethics commission exists or when a violation is taking place. So that city commission or council may also make a decision regarding penalties and violations when voting on the matter, if that exists there in that jurisdiction. And ideally, the local code would outline those penalties for public officers and procedures that would be carried out in times of violations. Otherwise, for now, the code simply cites state statutes for penalties. And then lastly is education, ethics education. So right now, the state of Florida requires at least 4 hours of ethics training upon appointment, and cities enforce this And in some cases, they also can include requirement of regular retreats or outside trainings for public officers to pursue, depending on what the jurisdiction chooses. And a board of ethics could also work to administer and hold ethics trainings for the elected officials. So once a code of ethics is established, should one be adopted by the city of Gainesville, then a person or body would need to be assigned to administer it. And in most cases, cities that adopt a code of ethics assign the responsibility of administering it to a board of ethics. This board can be composed of a number of volunteer members who meet when a potential violation of the code has come up and carry out respective complaint and public hearing procedures and eventually come to a conclusion. And to note, an inspector general typically has jurisdiction over issues that span what our city auditor administers here in Gainesville. So proceeding with that role would include potential restructuring of what rules and responsibility each role has jurisdiction over. But to summarize, an administrative body would ideally not encroach on any responsibilities of our current charter officers like city attorney, city auditor. It would directly govern and review violations of the code of ethics. It would be able to make recommendations to our city commission and mayor, as well as be a resource for ethics questions. They would be tasked with administering ethics training for our local elected officials, and then lastly, they would enforce, ideally would enforce some local election laws. So to note, there are still instances where the State of Florida Commission on Ethics may be approached for violations, questions, and so forth. And additionally, in the event that an ethical violation is not included in our local code of ethics and it's not under jurisdiction of the city auditor or equal opportunity director, that would be referred to the State Commission on Ethics. And just to recall that the state works with municipalities across Florida to use them as a resource, so having a local body to reference for questions would be a viable option. Okay, so here's my slide about jurisdictions in Florida, ended up all the way at the bottom. But just to reference again, so y'all have a visual of any places in Florida currently operating with this right now. These are the 2 counties that each have a code and commission on ethics. The city of Boca Raton is within Palm Beach County, and so they refer matters to that county commission. And the city of Jacksonville and the city of Tallahassee each have their own code and commission on ethics to administer it. So today we've been lucky enough to receive a visit from Mark Bannon, who's the executive director of the Palm Beach County Commission on Ethics, and he'll be giving you all a presentation about their commission and a bit about his experience with them and be available for questions, of course. So I'll open it up to Mark.
Thank you so much. Mr. Bannon, welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate you all having me come up here because this is really important to me. It's really important. And I've been with the Commission on Ethics 3 months after its inception. I got hired as their first investigator. Let me give you my background real quickly. I actually am a retired police officer. I spent 25 years with the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office, retired in an running an investigative unit there, and then went to law school because apparently I didn't realize you shouldn't do that during a recession, but regardless of that, went to that one down south, sorry. But anyway, my 2 son and daughter went here though, so we're
They
okay.
haven't posed a threat in quite some time.
No, well, not in football or basketball or sports, but they're always a threat. So I practiced, I was a state attorney for almost 2 years. Then I went into private practice. Again, don't do that during a recession. It's a really bad idea. There's lots of work, but nobody has any money. And then a friend of mine who is also he's a lifetime prosecutor, got the position at the Commission on Ethics and said, look, I've got to hire an investigator because we investigate things. You want to come out of private practice? So I did, and I've been there for the last 10 years. I've served as the first investigator. I've been the chief investigator when there were 2 of us. I've also been the interim staff counsel, although I didn't want that position full time. And then 4.5 years ago, I was appointed as the director. So that being said, let me tell you what I have here. This one sheet will just tell you basically how we came to be in a real quick fashion. The other one I didn't write, and I give you this because there's some statements in here that at your leisure you may want to read. Some of them are highlighted. The first page is probably going to make you mad. That's this guy's opinion of why we need ethics. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I didn't want to hide it, so I actually highlighted it. But it does talk about our commission in here and Broward County's. One of the differences is, just as a nomenclature idea, that when you create a commission on ethics and an IG, you have 2 different jobs, and we'll talk about that briefly. But your commission is the one who deals with the ethics issues. IG can refer things to us, we can refer things to them if it has to do with spending and things like that, which they cover. However, in Broward, the IG handles the ethics. There is no ethics commission, and they sort of handle ethics. And one of the things that Westford pointed out is in our first 5 years of existence, I think that's what he uses, 5 years, we had done over 100 complaints, investigated. Doesn't mean they were all valid, but investigated them. Broward had done none. Ethics complaints. They had done IG complaints over spending and things like that, but not ethics. So be careful when you don't have somebody pushing the ethics portion of this, it tends to get left behind. All right, that aside, let me go through my slides real quickly, which is basically an overview. It's the top one, I assume, right?
The right
Or
arrow,
to the right.
arrow.
Or the right one, it could be the right one. These are our current commissioners, well, they were as of December 31st. And what I want you to notice about this slide is who appoints these people to the Palm Beach County Commission on Ethics? Because one of the questions that came up from somebody in this table that comes up often is, how do we make sure this isn't political? That we don't appoint people that are going to be politically motivated? And the way we did it in Palm Beach County is nobody who's an elected official makes any appointment. All the appointments are made from outside agencies. You've got the Palm Beach County Bar Association in conjunction with 2 other smaller bars that have an appointment. You've got the president of the larger university. I'm also an FAU grad, I'm undergrad. Florida Atlantic University making an appointment. You've got the president of the public accountants in Palm Beach County making an appointment. You've got the Police Chiefs Association making an appointment. And yes, you do have one from the League of Cities, but the reason for that is one thing we've wanted on this board is somebody who had been an elected official, and that's the requirement for that position. You can't be one now because you look at things from a different perspective. So you've got a police perspective, because almost in every case, not everyone, but almost in every case, that's a former police chief that it is right now. He's a former West Palm police chief that sits on it now. So you have to have certain criteria as to whether you can serve on this. You have to have some experience in the ethics field, for one thing. Now, police chiefs, that's not too hard, but lawyers are a little tougher, because if you haven't worked those cases, you may not. I would like to say that Commissioner Sarah Schulman, who was our chair until December 31st, Governor DeSantis appointed her a judge, so she had to resign to go to judge school. So good for her. She's well-deserved, but it kind of left me in a lurch, because we only have 4, and that's always a dangerous thing. Okay, but remember the word independence, because if an ethics commission is not independent from political pressure, then they can't get anything done, because you're always going to have that pressure. We have one ethics movement. We have an inspector general who investigates contracts, oversight, waste, abuse, and fraud, and mismanagement of resources within the city or county. We, on the other hand, look at ethics complaints. We handle advisory opinions. In other words, you ask us a question and we write a letter, just like the Florida Commission does, saying you can do this, that, or the other, or you can't do it at all. So at least if we say you can do it, a lot of times that's what you need to take to your supervisor, because they want to see that it's okay. And we've done about 400 letters, a little over that in 10 years, so we don't mind writing
And
it.
have those tended to create a precedent? I mean, have you given the same question, the same letter more than once, or usually is it that we've already made an opinion on that?
Well, what we will do is simply send them that letter.
Yeah, okay.
And tell them that this is what we think applies. But if you want one, that your circumstances are so different, a lot of times they are, we'll write another one. It's fine. One of the things we also do is training and outreach. Obviously, this is part of our outreach. Training, we have it both on video and on CD or DVD, whatever that is, the discs. And we also do in-person training. Myself and Christy Kelly, who's a general counsel in my office, go out and do training whenever it's requested. Sometimes in a larger city, they don't want to do that because it takes too much time, but the smaller cities in particular will do that a lot. Although we do have some that, West Palm Beach I did a couple of years ago, so it is, it's not necessarily based on that. The nice thing about outside training is they can ask questions. You can't ask a video questions. You can call us and ask, but you can't ask a video. So, commission staff, there are 5 of us. I'm the executive director, as you know, Christy Kelly's general counsel. Gina Levesque is the intake and compliance manager. And what that means is intake means she gets all the stuff that comes to us, whether it be complaints or requests for advisory opinion and everything, and keeps track of it. Compliance means that she goes around to the municipalities and the county and checks, because our code requires mandatory training when you come on and retraining depending on what your policy is in your city. We've got cities that train every year. We've got cities that don't train but every 4 years. So it's based on their policy, but they have to be following their policy. If they're due retraining, we will audit those things to see that they're doing it. And our two investigators, Abigail Arizari, who is formerly from the DCF Inspector General's office, and Mark Higgs, who's old like me. He's a retired Chicago police officer. So, what is our jurisdiction? We have jurisdiction over all county and municipal officials and employees. And that means appointed officials or elected. It doesn't matter. If you're on an advisory board and you were appointed by the city council, then you're under our county commission, or any of our cities, you're under us. The only city we don't have jurisdiction over is a city called Westlake, because they came into being after we came into being. And unlike the Inspector General, these ordinances were written at the same time. We're both independent offices. But the person working on their side was smart enough to say if any cities come into being, you're automatically under Inspector General, and ours aren't. So they have to vote to do that. Right now, there's like 10 people living there. They're just building, so we won't even push it. We've been before them, but we're not going to push it till they elect a commission. And I think they will do that because it doesn't cost them anything to do that, and it makes sense. But we have a jurisdiction over 3 ordinances. The Code of Ethics is the main one. It's a 12-page document that basically follows the state law in some instances and is more strict than the state law in others. We've got the lobbyist registration ordinance that applies to people that are registering to lobby, but it also, I'll talk about that in a minute, it also gives us some other things that we look at. There are certain things you're not allowed to do as a lobbyist. And one of those things is once the bids are open and you've got that period that they have to be in by, you can't contact anybody trying to get them to listen to your side, unless you do it in writing. Why? Because if you do it in writing, we can see a record of what was said. You cannot meet with them and talk to them because there's no way for anybody to know what was said. Oh, and the post-employment ordinance, basically, it only covers county commissioners and high-ranking county officials, and it just means that for between 6 months and 2 years after they retire, depending on their position, they cannot personally lobby before the county commission. They can be a part of the effort, but they can't appear before them for like 2 years. And actually, as we were talking about, that's now state law anyway, so it really wouldn't matter. It's for everybody. Okay, Code of Ethics, basically 12 pages divided in 8 different sections. The major sections we deal with, of course, are prohibited conduct, misuse of your power, basically, and the gift law. We've had a few with anti-nepotism, not many. And it talks about ethics training and the requirement for training and all of that. But it's not very long. It is, however, complex sometimes. I read this thing all the time for 10 years, and I'm still finding out things that, oh, I didn't realize how that would apply there, so I need to keep up on that.
So is your gift law more stringent than the state gift law?
Our gift law is not. In fact, it almost mirrors the state's. It almost does. The state gift law has some other aspects to it, about $25 gifts below 100. Ours only talks about prohibited gifts or gifts you have to report. And the reason it's different, and the reason we don't go into that, is because you all, as elected officials, are what we call state reporters. You do a quarterly. If you have anything to declare as a gift, you send it to Tallahassee. We get a copy of that. If you're in our county, we get a copy when you file that. But if you don't, if you're an employee or you're someone who's not a state reporter, then you don't have any reporting requirements for gifts, and you do under us. All those people that take gifts that are not exceptions, and there are a lot of exceptions to gifts, things like family, that's accepted in state law and ours. You know, if your family gives you a gift, I don't care. Good for you, I'm happy for you. But we don't need to have that reported to us. So we have an annual report period for people that have gifts. And I've there's not that many. I've only reported once, mainly because nobody likes me enough to give me gifts, but regardless of that. And it had to do with my son getting scholarship money when he was going to school here from the PBA. And because my membership was the reason for that, it actually is a flow-through gift through me, so I actually had to claim that. And it didn't matter because they're not lobbyists, they're not vendors, but still I had to do that. We also have a provision called cone of silence, which is really what I was talking about earlier, written communications. It means once they're deciding the matter, between the time that everybody's stuff is in and they make a decision, you can't contact them other than in writing. You need to stay away and let people do their work. And that includes staff, if they have some decision-making power, or at least input. It includes everybody. We've actually had a couple of violations of this. Most of them were not intentional, but they just don't get it. You can't talk about this stuff. Let them make their decision. Post-employment ordinance, I'm not going to go into too much because I already explained it. This is our process for complaints, by the way. Oh, we have one thing that the Florida Commission on Ethics does not have. Florida Commission on Ethics cannot file complaints. You must file a sworn complaint with the Florida Commission on Ethics. It doesn't matter what you tell them or what you show them. If you don't have a sworn complaint, they have no power to act. That's the law under that. In our case, we take sworn complaints, but we also have the ability to initiate complaints. So if you give us information that's not on a sworn complaint, and we can document that information, because we'll do what we call an inquiry if it's worth doing an inquiry. Look at the documents, and if we think there might be a problem, we'll file our own complaint just so we can initiate an investigation to see. Many times those complaints turn out to be wrong, and that's fine. So you dismiss the complaint and you exonerate the person that was complained upon. But sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're simply not. We have a mayor, unfortunately, that was removed by the governor, not based wholly, but based a lot on our investigation because there were things going on that shouldn't have. So it does happen, but that was a self-initiated complaint. Nobody sent us sworn information. We found that out through different sources of what was going on. So basically that's how our system works. So you can follow that. It's also in the book if you want to look at that. By the way, this is our code of ethics and our handbook because we changed it, not the code. We've made very few changes to the code, although we're in the process of making some major changes on some stuff this year. But that code book is a good handbook to have because it also answers some questions in there that are pretty questions we hear quite regularly. Okay, training and outreach I've talked about. We have an ethics awareness month. We do attend functions, Kiwanis Club, things like that, and speak at these places just to keep ethics in everybody's mind. This is the ethics decision tree, and basically our former staff council did this. It basically is a process that we tell people to go through when they have an issue before them and they're not sure whether they can do what they want to do. Before you do anything, the first question is it legal to do this? Because if you've got a law against it, that's the end of the discussion. It's illegal to do or unlawful? No, you can't do it. The second thing is it comply with our code. Let us help you with that. Call us, write us. We'll walk you through it. We will research the opinions we have on file to see if any of them fit you, and if not, we'll write another one. But don't act first, because when you ask us for an opinion, you can't have already committed the action. In police work, we used to call that a confession. But it's basically, before you act, you need to call us. Then does it comply with city or county policy? That's another thing that people don't understand. And we harp on this at training. It doesn't matter if the code doesn't say you can't do it. It doesn't matter if the state law says that. You work for an agency, an entity. If they say you can't do it, if that's in their policy, then that's the end of the discussion. For example, in the gift law, it says you can't take more than $100, whether an employer or an official, from anybody who's a lobbyist or a vendor, if they lobby or a vendor of your entity, say a city, in any given year, and that's an aggregate amount. But if you work in the county on the procurement department, their policy is you can't take anything from a vendor, ever, as a gift. So don't come to us and say, well, it was under $50, it's not a violation of the code. No, but it is a violation of policy, and if you work in that department, you have to know the policy. And it makes sense. You don't want people buying from vendors, taking gifts from vendors. It's nonsensical. And the last one is what we call the good government standard, and that basically talks about it may not be in violation of a law, but you need to think about whether you want to do this. I use an example in training sometimes. There was a high-ranking county official who asked us about a gift, if he could take this gift, and we said, yes, you can take it, but you may want to consider how it looks. I can't tell you can't do something if there's no rule against it or law against it, but we do try to remind him that this doesn't look good. So he took it, and that's fine. He has every right to do that. He also had every right to read the 3 days he spent in the Palm Beach Post while they talked about how bad this looked. We're only trying to help here. That's what we're trying to do. When you ask us particularly advice before you do it, if you don't want to take it, that's fine, but you suffer those consequences. We've been doing this for 10 years. We can spot an issue, and so can reporters. They just can't. So, enough said about that. We do advisory opinions. We've done 22 this past year. We did 22. We did a lot more in the early days, but at some point when you have that many, you're going to have a lot of the same issues, although the circumstances may change. One of the things I did change also when I took over is we were never giving informal advice. When people would call us, we'd say you have to, but that was because we were new at this and we wanted to get these opinions written. And now I say, look, if it's something that's simple, we'll give them the advice. It's general advice anyway. If it's complicated, and a lot of them are, then they need to ask us for an opinion, because we've got to research this now. And we don't want to leave it out in the cold if it violates state law. We don't generally do state law, but we do tell you that, by the way, we're saying you can do it under our code. You may not be able to do it under the state's code, so you're going to have to ask your city attorney that, who's the expert in that area. And let's see. Our enforcement powers, because we talked about this. We are a code enforcement, county code enforcement bureau. That's what we do. So we don't have the authority to file criminal charges. However, we do have the authority to give letters of instruction, which we do a lot of. If we don't think what you did was done purposely, we'll give you a letter of instruction and say, look, this is what you did, you can't do that, don't do that again. You get that once, by the way, for any issue, you get one. We can do letters of reprimand, which don't sound like a big deal, but if you're an employee and you want to be promoted someday, you don't need that in your file, and if you're an elected official, that's a horrible thing. It's just a horrible thing to have floating around. And so we try not to give those, but occasionally we will. And we can fine up to $500 per violation. We have fined one person back in 2011 $1,000 for 2 violations, but without going into the details, he deserved to be fined $1,000. He just did. And the state attorney filed criminal charges against him anyway because of our investigation. I will tell you that if you knowingly and willfully violate our code, the state attorney can file criminal charges. They're code enforcement criminal charges, and they carry the same penalty as a first-degree misdemeanor, which is up to a year in jail and up to a $1,000 fine. It is not considered a first-degree misdemeanor conviction. It is conviction of a county ordinance violation, but the penalty is the same. So you could go to jail if what you did is bad enough. Okay. That's my last slide. That's our hotline. We have a website. You can like us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter. I don't know what those things mean, but my general counsel does, and she says you can do it. So I say go for it.
They're full of completely sane and normal people having reasonable discussions.
You know, until my kids got old enough and moved away, I had no interest in Facebook, and now I use that to sort of follow them around. Because they're always yakking on it, so I just listen. Does anyone have any questions? One of the things, before I do that, let me tell you one thing, because how we came about originally was, in a period of about 5 years, we had 3 county commissioners and 2 West Palm Beach city commissioners indicted and go to prison for, at the time, it was called honest services fraud, which the state's court has overturned, but there's still, it has various names. It means basically using your position to get something you're not entitled to have. So, That's what started us. It went before a grand jury because the grand jury was asked to say, you know, what's going on here? What can we do here? And this was their recommendation, an hygiene and ethics commission. And a lot of that came from Miami-Dade, which had the first ethics commission, at least in a county. They, in like the 80s, they developed theirs. And a lot of our stuff is similar to theirs too as well. They also do the elections law. We do not do elections law. However, what I would like to tell you is this. I mean, whether you do this or not, that's entirely up to you all. We will give you as much help as you want if you decide to. But don't wait for a crisis. Because what happened to us is because of that crisis, for the first 3 years, we were really hammering people in terms of complaints. And first of all, it was new to everybody, but more importantly, that was what the public wanted. We just had people go to jail here. We want you guys doing that. And it never should have been to that point, because what we do now is almost, we do investigations, we do complaints, but really our focus is on advice and making sure that people understand their obligations under the code. Now, there are always going to be people that understand them and don't care, and we'll deal with those as we have to. In fact, probably the state attorney would deal with them. But we do a lot of training and we do a lot of advice, and really if we had never had another complaint, I would be happy, because that means people are doing what they're supposed to be doing. It's hard to say, but after a crisis, that's not what the public wants to see. They're okay with it now, but they didn't want to see that. They wanted us going after people that are doing these things. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox now.
Not at all. Thank you so much. That was very helpful, very provocative. And I want to just circle around to one of the final points you made. I want to thank Commissioner Ward for bringing this forward in the absence of crisis. I mean, I was just thinking that kind of before you even said that to do this right, I think it's important to do it when nothing is sort of breathing down our neck and forcing us to do this, because then we sort of craft it and design it how it's going to serve our community the best, as opposed to being reactive. And it sounds like so much what you do now is proactive. I mean, you're helping train, you're helping avoid. It's the rare circumstance where somebody, despite all of your all's best efforts, still sort of strays off the path, and you have to take sort of punitive action. But you know, what I'm hearing is you get all this set up, it becomes standard operating procedure for everybody that works within the jurisdictions, and then you avoid all of those, you know, sort of snake pits that otherwise would be out there.
You absolutely do, and as I said before, sometimes when an employee wants to do something, he goes with supervisor who will require him to call us and get a letter and make sure that this is okay under the code. And that's what we want them to do, because it's not always okay. Sometimes you can't do it. Sometimes there's a way you can do it, but you have to do it that way, and we can spell that out for you. This is what you have to do to follow these steps so that you don't get stuck. The problem always is when people call us and say, hey, I just did, is that okay? Well, don't ask me advice when you've already done it. Hopefully it is okay, but I can't give you advice now. You've already taken the action.
That's what you need is the attorney's office.
Yeah.
Well, Ben, if you don't mind, why don't you join us, and in case anybody has any questions specifically for you, and then we'll also just you know, move to deliberations and see where we want to head with this. David, you want to start off? In order to
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just had a question, sir.
Yes.
So I want to hear more about how you, I know it was sort of under different circumstances how the commission got formed. You know, but as I think about our steps and how to make this a reality, I think that as we grow and as we become, you know, a much more prominent city in Florida, you know, it's hard to be more prominent when you're already the most prominent. You know, anyway, I think that I want to know how it got started, because the more that I hear about this, the more that I think this ought to be something that the county commission is talking about as well. If this is going to be something that governs the whole county, you know, I think that they need to be in the early conversations, because I mean, there's 5. You said you'll have 5 positions. Did you start with 5 positions?
No, we started with 4.
Okay, so
we started with 3. The general counsel was originally supposed to be someone who could volunteer. Well, that's fine, But when you need the general counsel, she's not going to be available to give you advice. And while I give advice to the commission in terms of procedural and how we do things, even though I'm a lawyer, she gives them advice as to how that applies in the code, because that's part of her job. And I don't mean the county commission, I mean our commission. How this started between 2005 and 2009, I think, 2004 and 2009, we had, again, those 5 commissioners that all went to prison. Every one of them went to prison for one thing or another. And they weren't related things. Misuse of office, basically, is what it is. And so the state attorney at the time formed a grand jury to look into the problem to see what we could do about it. That was the basis of that, and this was what the grand jury came up with. You know, we've looked around the state. You got the Florida Commission, Miami-Dade has one. At that time, I think Jacksonville was the only other one who had one then. They are starting looking at it in the Tampa-St. Pete area.
So sorry to interrupt.
Oh, that's right.
So it sounds like the motivation to really figure out who's going to do what was just the sheer pressure from the fallout of those officials having to go to jail.
That's what started it, yes.
So I want to figure out, you probably know this because you seem to have a lot of information about the other ones, what other boards were created under different circumstances similar to ours, where we're just trying to figure out what's the best approach in terms of who's going to pay for what, how do we make the similar decisions that you did, who appoints who?
I don't think Broward's was directly related, but their commission is somewhat different. In fact, in this, and again, I didn't write it, but in here they talk about the fact that they've got an IG and a commission or a code of ethics, but they don't have a commission on ethics, so it becomes sort of murky. But they weren't created because of any specific wrongdoing. Tallahassee's, when they started that, I don't think that was in answer to any specific problem. They just looked around and said,
So let me rephrase my question. Have county commissions started this in those counties, or have municipalities?
No.
The seat of the counties?
The counties that have it right now are us, Broward, and Miami-Dade, where it's countywide. In the Tampa-St. Pete area, either Pinellas or Hillsborough is looking to do it. They haven't. And I went and spoke about 2 years ago to Lee County. They were going to put it on a referendum, and they had about 6 different items and decided not to put that one on, which is fine, it's their county. So, I mean, to me, the selling point of this, should you choose to do it, is, do you really want to wait till what happened in Palm Beach County? Do you want to wait till that happens? Because it's taken us 10 years. We have changed the culture of our county. Not that everybody was in that culture, but enough of it was. We have changed the culture to where they're asking questions now, and they want to do, everybody's on the page of, geez, I don't want an ethics violation. Is it going to be used politically? It might, but we take steps to avoid that. One of the steps we take is, if you file a complaint on someone running for election or currently an incumbent, within 60 days of election, we put it in a drawer till after the election. We're not going to be used to affect an election. We're just not. I'm not saying it won't be looked at, but we're not looking at it till after the election, because that is really the best way to just stop them from using it. Because if you're outside of 60 days of an election, most people weren't even paying attention at that point. Unless the complaint comes in and it's clearly no violation, or the information's just incorrect, then we might put it out immediately and dismiss it because there's no violation. I don't know if that helps or hurts an election, but it's not fair to have it over your head. One thing we do know is, if you send a complaint to us, we will not talk about that complaint. We won't even acknowledge that it exists until we're finished with it and it's been heard at the probable cause stage by the commission and either dismissed or upheld and sent for a hearing. But that doesn't stop the complainant from doing it. So they can go to the press, and they have. But the press calls us, and we say, can't tell you.
All those eventualities.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. So for my colleagues, I'm interested in us pursuing this path, but I don't want us to reinvent the wheel. Obviously, the PBC wasn't so much inventing the wheel as it was a firewall. So in our case, I just want us to find the wheel that we can best reconstruct.
Very good. Okay. We have Harvey, and then Gigi, and then Gail, and then Ellen. And then I guess you guys, I figured. Be the caboose.
Thank you so much for being here, Mr. Bennett. I appreciate you do it. It's valuable for us to have the conversation with you here to bounce some ideas off of. I talked, by the way, to Gwen Graham, who serves on the Tallahassee board, and she said she couldn't make it today, but if we have another conversation about this, she's very interested in to talk to us as well. I originally went to a couple of county commissioners and said, hey, are you interested in doing this? Because, just for economies of scale, I would rather it be functional for 260,000 people than 135,000 people. They weren't not interested, but they've got their own fish to fry right now. This was not something that floated to the top of what they were interested in. And I sent an invitation to each of the county commissioners last week to let them know that we were going to be talking about this. So they're aware that we're doing it. When you said don't wait for a crisis, that's a great slogan for this. I mean, that's perfect. Because that's exactly where I'm coming from. I think we're in a good spot right now, but this is the time to be able to do it and consider it well and not force something out there that doesn't necessarily meet our needs properly. Was this set in motion in Palm Beach County by ordinance or by charter amendment?
It was set in motion initially by ordinance, and it only covered county employees and county officials. And then we had a referendum vote, and 72% of the people, and 50% at least in every municipality, voted to implement it. So it was a very high amount. But we had just gone through a crisis, so you were going to see that. The other thing about his research that I gave you is he'll talk about the different ways you can scale this down. You don't have to have a 5-person commission and 5 staff. We're for a whole county, I've got 16,000 people under our jurisdiction. That's a lot of people. We've got a lot of employees with the municipalities and us. And we've also got lobbyists and vendors that occasionally will be under our jurisdiction, depending on what's going on. But there are ways to scale this in a different way. The only thing I would say, you can even do it like the city of West Palm has an ethics officer. The problem with it, and he's really good because he served on the Florida Commission, so they're not going to mess with him because he knows his stuff. But the problem with that idea is now he's appointed by the mayor. That's always an issue. How independent can you be when you're appointed by the elected body that you're supposed to be overseeing? So I would say if you do like that idea of just doing a code of ethics with an ethics officer to give advice and such, you should figure out some way to make that appointment as independent as possible. Or put within there that once appointed, he can't be removed without certain criteria.
So I would, I very much want to move forward with something. I would only be in favor of it if we did not do the appointing of a commission. I want to be as independent as possible. Do you all compensate your commissioners?
No, every one of them is volunteer. Well, we pay for their parking, but that's it. No, we meet once a month, and we don't. The other thing commissioners do, by the way, aside from hearing complaints, is they do the advisory opinions. Staff does them, but they go through them and make sure they say what they wanted to say, and they'll change things in there because the advice is actually from them. So we meet once a month, and sometimes we've got a lot going on, and sometimes not as much. Toward the holidays, you have less, but that's because people are busy doing other things.
Well, I would see this as much or more of a training and reference tool than an enforcement tool. The enforcement's important, and I want to make sure that it exists. But I would like a really good board that would be able to do training for us and offer it to other entities in the area too.
Generally, since your board are volunteers, they're not going to be doing the training. Your staff will do the training. The other way that he talks about it here to do this is to simply, if you're just going to follow state law, and the city attorney I know is usually but city attorneys have a million things going on. So get an independent attorney to do that, to do the ethics portion of it. Because the city attorney as good as they are, and believe me, I have long conversations. When I have a question about state law, I ask them because I tend to not want to read that law and confuse it with ours, and that happens. But whoever's doing it has to be independent of the politics. They just have to be, or there's going to be pressure.
So you raised another issue that I have not, another way of thinking about it that I haven't considered, which is the number of people that are within your purview. I was thinking about it by population. Population is really not the issue. It's the number of people that you're serving directly.
Yes.
Which is, that ratio of Gainesville to Palm Beach County is a whole lot more in line than, we have 2,200 employees, plus other folks who are part of the process.
And I think the lady from Tallahassee is the perfect person to ask, because that's a city that has an ethics commission, so.
Right, and they, in Tallahassee, it's part of their charter at this point. I think they started there, and one of the comments that I got from one of their commissioners was that they wish they had not done it that way, or he wishes they had not done it that way, because it's harder to fix it. And once it's in charter, it's a bear to change anything.
Right.
Whereas if we do it by ordinance, then we can tinker as needs to be tinkered. Not with the ethics portion of it, but with the functionality of it. So I would urge that as we move forward, we think about it as an ordinance-based issue. Then, and then once it's good, once we know it works and the kinks are worked out of it, then maybe it's something that is a charter-based thing, or maybe it continues to exist as an ordinance-based code. Regardless, thank you very much. I appreciate you give me some different ways to think about it, and that's very useful.
Thank you so much. This is very informative. And I have a question. I don't know if you can answer it or our team can answer it. How does this relate or work hand in hand with the Equal Opportunity Office, the Auditor's Office? How does that work together? Do you encroach on their responsibilities or their duty? How does this play a part in?
It really wouldn't. The auditor's office, the back and forth is on our side is between the IG and them, because we just don't do audits like that, financial audits. It's not our specialty. What people have to understand is the commission, the Code of Ethics has 12 provisions, and the prohibited conduct provisions are all we have jurisdiction over. You cannot complain to us because someone's doing something that's maybe wrong but is not in violation of this code, because our answer is that's not in violation of the code.
Do your violations overlap with EEO? Or
no.
Okay.
No, they should. No, because it shouldn't matter. It shouldn't matter. For example, if you've got a policy in your county or your city that you have to hire so many minority contractors, and you fail to do that, that's an issue for a circuit court to decide if you're not following that. That's not an issue for us, because it's not a misuse of power for your own benefit or per se, it's improperly applying your code. And we don't deal with those kind of things. So it should never really overlap.
So you all wouldn't necessarily have any type of transparency issues or?
We are as transparent as it gets. If you go onto our website, you will find every advisory opinion we've written since day one. You will find every investigation we've done, including the documents and even the interviews, the voice interviews that were recorded. The only ones you won't find, but we have, you can get them, are what we call inquiries that never rose to the level of a complaint. We still have them, they're still public record, but everything else is actually on our site. You can download it and read anything you want. But we live the transparency rule. We absolutely have to.
Thank you for that. So our staff, with the same questions, what was from your perspective? What did you find?
Yeah, that pretty much the same thing. So as like a general rule of thumb, like the commission or whoever is administering the code only has jurisdiction over what's in that code, and it'll typically be separate from what the auditor or the opportunity person is going to be looking into as well. It would be more things like focusing, like no conflict of interest, terms of conduct, stuff like that. Whereas, for instance, I mentioned the Equal Opportunity Director will look into cases of harassment and stuff like that that won't typically be mentioned in the Code of Ethics.
But if I may piggyback, as this planning process and consideration process moves forward, these are the kinds of questions that everyone would sit down and make sure are considered, right? Where does one charter's boundary end? And is it then picked up by the Commission on Ethics or whatever ethical board we have? Is there overlap? And just to be alert for those to make sure that we have neither gaps nor overlaps.
Okay, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for being here. It's been really helpful. Can you explain a little bit more about the structure? So you said there are commissioners that make decisions, and then you mentioned staff. Can
Well,
you tell me about staff and what that means?
well, that was the 5 people I showed.
Oh, they are the
Me,
staff.
general, that's it. We have 5
Okay, and you
staff.
are unpaid.
No, we're paid.
You're paid, okay.
I'm missing the commissioners are unpaid. The commissioners are all
The commissioners-
volunteer.
Can you go back to that slide with
Yeah.
the staff? There's a slide with the staff on
Do you
it.
know how to find it faster?
Probably not, but
We've got a hard copy of it too.
Yes, and all of these documents are uploaded into the backup, so
Yeah.
everybody can find them online where the
There you go.
agenda is, including these handouts, and we've got some extra handouts that I'll put by the door.
So that's the commission, those are the appointed people, here's the
right,
staff.
the appointed
Oh,
people
okay. So you can
are
see
volunteers.
that.
They don't get any
So
compensation.
the county, almost if like, for instance, there was like Department of Parks and Rec, there's this own office, that's the Commission on Ethics staff, so you are paid staff, so that's.
We have
coming
our
from
own,
the
right, we have
county's
an
budget,
office.
Right.
Okay, so this would be another department potentially of the city of Gainesville?
Oh, potentially.
Potentially. Okay.
If, right, and exactly, and
Much
that, and being
smaller.
independent, if you look, if you were to pull up our, a layout of our governmental functions, employees and such, you'd see the county administrator, but you'd see a dotted line to both myself and the OIG's office, the IG's office, because while they financially support us, they have no direct authority. I mean, I get along great with the county administrator, she's a great lady, Virginia, but she couldn't fire me. She could ask the commission to fire me, but she can't, because I'm independent of her office, I'm only funded through her office.
Funded, I get, okay, so the funding would come through the city, which is why you had a conversation.
Which allows you, quite frankly, to be more objective about what you're doing. Because you don't worry about the repercussions as long as you're doing the right thing, as long as you're doing it fairly. You don't worry about repercussions because you, and I've never been threatened with that anyway, but still, you don't have, that's a big deal to remain independent.
Can you remind me what your, how many people you are,
About 16,000 employees and officials.
okay?
And if I may, in Sophia's research, which is in the backup, she investigated or researched several jurisdictions also outside of Florida to look at how their boards are structured. And so there are structures that have different configurations between the counties and the municipalities, some that have paid staff, some that are all volunteers. So there's there are a variety of ways this could be structured, which would sort of be the next steps of considering this is what it would look like here.
Okay.
I don't think you need a staff our size, quite frankly, for your city. I'm just saying that's what we have.
Yeah, okay. So once someone makes a complaint, then it is, then your office keeps, until there's an opinion that's written.
No. When someone makes a complaint, it's on an action that's already been taken, so we wouldn't give them advice on it at that point.
Okay.
There would be no opinion.
Okay.
If someone asks us advice,
Mhm.
then we can either give them informal advice in certain times, or we write an opinion to tell them how to do what they want to do, or that they can't do it because it violates such and such. When someone files a complaint, the first thing we do with it is check for legal sufficiency. My mouth isn't working today. And that's really just 2 steps. Number 1, do we have jurisdiction over them? I get complaints on judges. We don't have jurisdiction over judges. That's the bar and the Supreme Court. We don't have any jurisdiction. So that would automatically be not legally sufficient because we don't have and that complaint would be dismissed administratively. It would never go to the commission. They would know about it, but you can't investigate things you don't have jurisdiction over.
But once that complaint is made, then it's subject to sunshine?
No.
And then, no, it's not?
No, we have it is subject to sunshine when we have completed up to a certain point. So, but when we either dismiss the complaint or find probable cause on the complaint, at that point it becomes a public record. It is not a public record until then. It's an exception within the law.
Okay, but if somebody made a complaint, then they could make it public? Or
Sure,
they
they
could say,
could.
this is what I did,
Mhm.
and these are the...
And the press used to call us and ask us, and You know we can't talk about that.
Yeah.
Well, just tell me if they did. How about if I just say no? I'm not going to tell you anything. That's the rule.
I do have some questions about what in your experience, how much this has been politicized? Like, how often has this been, or has it been used for either harassment purposes or,
The problem with using it for harassment
fraudulent
is that we
claims or-
follow the state law in terms of if you file a complaint that either has false, now you're swearing to this, has false information or is intentionally misleading or information that you knew not to be true, then under state standards, you can be sanctioned for that. We can get paid for our investigative time. We can get, if you had to get an attorney, we can get lawyer fees,
Okay.
all those things.
That's good to know.
So there is something you can do about it, but under the state law, that's a very high standard because that always is.
Okay.
Now, you asked about my experience? Yeah, when we were first here, more so, the complaints would increase as we got around election time. One of the ways we fought that was we set a policy that if you send us a complaint, within 60 days we're going to sit on it.
Right.
We're not going to use it. And that, as much as anything else, really slowed it down. I didn't notice any uptake in the 2016 election. I really didn't. And that's good to know. I think that people eventually figure out you're not going to be used as a political football, and so they stop. They find other ways.
This is true.
They will always find another way.
They just put it in the paper and say it's true.
Thank
Back
you,
to
that
that
was helpful.
Facebook thing you were talking about. Oh,
Okay, just checking, you were done. So one of the last things that you said, responding to Commissioner Johnson's question about complaints that you follow up on outside of city staff and contacts. Do you follow up on complaints about other businesses
No.
in the community? Okay, so no other businesses. How about if they have a contract with the city? That would be within the realm of...
Well, it would be in terms of the gift law or a quid pro quo situation, but it would really be the city person we'd be investigating as opposed to...
Who's on the city side receiving it?
Now, one of the things we did in 2011, one of the things we changed was initially, if you took an improper gift from a vendor, it was over $100, you're not allowed to do that. You would have a complaint, but nothing really happened to the vendor. And we said, well, that's stupid. So we switched it now. The vendor also has a complaint. Because once they're a vendor, they're under our jurisdiction for purposes of gift giving, and they're under our jurisdiction for purposes of
Other
giving
contracts.
false information on a contract.
Right.
And that's actually an ethics violation under our code. If they give information to get a bid and that information is false, they can be charged with an ethics complaint.
that's-
And if they were given the contract, it can be
Okay,
set
that's what I was
aside.
going to say, somewhere it should...
In our code, it says it can be set aside.
Right, okay. So going back, I'm wondering where this sits with some of the other things that we have on our table. We're getting into that point where we're going to be talking about our budget again, and what do we add with what we already have going, and making sure that, we've got the codes of housing, that we're working on getting set up. Our equity, I'm looking at this and asking how does it fit in with equity. So then I look at, staff time and energy to get this up. And wondering where do we have staff already in place, and what would the process be that would be able to, like what you're saying, you can't use the auditor or the EO office because these policies aren't there. Well, what policies would be in a code of ethics that couldn't be put into something else? Could they fall under the realm of another department already?
We have, as you pointed out, Boca's one, we have several cities that have codes of ethics written into their stuff.
Yeah.
Not enforceable by us. It can't be.
Right, but it's...
But they are enforceable
auditor-
as policies. The problem with that is that's enforceable against employees.
Mhm.
It isn't against elected officials. If you violate an employment policy as an elected official, you can't get fired. So that's the issue with policies.
Right, and that comes back with don't wait for a crisis. But I see that we have some crises in some other areas that we're trying to deal with. And so my question is the priority of where would this fit in? we are learning that we all want to have some focuses on some of the community crises. And honestly, guys, I just can't see that this is a higher priority to what we have to deal with our housing and equity with the opportunities. You know, our auditor's office already has the hotline, so if there's bad activities going on within our employees, we've got a way to deal with that. And I would wonder what else we could combine. So I don't have a high priority. This isn't on my high priority list to do a whole separate staff time and salaries and energy to try to get this set up as a priority for the next year or 2 years.
I mean, this is absolutely your guys'
Yeah, I'm
decision, but you also have to understand, Jacksonville does this with a part-time person. She has no other staff. She's a
Okay.
part-time person and she does this. They have a commission, they're volunteers. Well, that doesn't cost you anything because they're volunteers.
No,
So
but
it
get that
can be
set up.
done at a lesser level.
To get that set up is going to take a lot of our staff's time to figure out how to do that. And there's money involved with that. And again, I will come back to the other priorities that I see facing the city right now are just really, really, I think there's a separation of, and again, I don't know what else is going to come up in our discussion of other things that we want to bring forward, but I don't see this one as a priority for what I'm hearing went through the development of it in Palm Beach without looking at, you know, the training, you know, that our city staff are ethic, you know, follow procedures of ethics with their relationship and how they treat each other. That's coming, you know, we're going to be doing some training soon on equity to teach people how to recognize implicit and explicit biases. You know, somewhere, how's that training to be able to come into relating to ethics as well? You know, we've got a lot of ethics that we've got training that we could do with mental health first aid. You know, how does that get done? So what I wonder is, for the training to be able to be done, how much of this would need to be in-house staff, people that are already in departments, or an outside consultant who would be able to come in and do the ethics training? If it's going to be, you know, so those are questions that I think it's important for us to consider. This is the first time, you know, that I'm looking at this item. I do ethics for real estate. I do ethics as a city commissioner. I really kind of feel like this is a little far away from the other priorities I've got right now. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for being here. You mentioned that you're making changes to your code of ethics, but that's not done by the Commission on Ethics. That law is changed by the Board of County Commissioners?
Well,
or is that done?
yes and no. What happens is we've made our changes over the past year, working with the League of Cities Attorneys and the county attorney, so that everybody was on board and knew why we were wanted. And they're minor changes, not major things, but just, you have unintended consequences when you start a new law, and that's what we're trying to get out of the code. And so what happens is we take this before our commission, and they tell us, great. And then we form a committee, what they call a drafting committee, and they look it over, and then it goes to the county commission. But yes, because it's a county ordinance, the county commission must implement it.
Okay. And to Commissioner Ward's, the same point, Commissioner Ward's point about being a charter or an ordinance, I think these types of things are much better to be an ordinance because times change and issues change as well. Sometimes there might be loopholes that form in later dates. So I do have a question. So you mentioned that your department's under the county government, correct? And just you said you were...
We are funded through county government.
Funded through county government, but who can hire and fire you and your staff?
I can hire and fire my staff, the commission can hire and fire me.
The
Now.
Ethics Commission. Yeah.
Yes, the ethics commission, not the county commission. Now, my staff, more than me, if they were to violate a policy, an employment policy that would get somebody fired from the county, that's going to happen anyway. Technically, they can't, but if you would fire this guy for doing it, then I'm going to do that because, you know, I'm not answerable to them, but I am answerable to common sense and the way labor rules have to be done.
And those, in your form, the Ethics Commission, is that considered a sunshine board, or is it not, because it's actually not directly appointed by the?
It is a sunshine board. It is a sunshine board, and in fact, we have sunshine training all the time on stuff. You know, when we email particularly, tell them, don't answer this email by respond to all, because we're going to be talking about this. Yeah, it is a sunshine board, and it's also it's like any code enforcement board. It's quasi judicial at times.
And the enforcement and penalties. So in your board, you can levy the $500 fine. Is anything sent back to like elected official? Like, so say there is something in one of the cities that's under your jurisdiction, and there is something found, I guess you can find them, but is that also sent to that county city commission for them to do kind of further stuff if they want to kind of?
Well, not specifically, but after we have every meeting, we always do a press release on what happened during the meeting, and that's when those things would be on the press release, that the commission found no probable cause, or found probable cause, or, you know, they engaged in an agreement as a violation to pay this much.
And you mentioned the misdemeanor charges. That's just a county ordinance. Is that correct?
Yeah, it would be a county ordinance charge, but it would carry the same penalties, same sanctions as a first degree.
And does your board make that judgment, or does that go to the state attorney? It's done in circuit court.
We send it to the state attorney.
It's tried.
They do it, yeah. And we have had some that do that.
Yeah.
In fact, one that we lost a trial over it, but that's okay, it happens.
So I'm interested, but I think to Commissioner Earle's point first, I think we need to be very careful and make sure that we look at all the different ones across the state. I mean, you know, Palm Beach County, you're 7 times bigger than, or at least our jurisdiction in the city. And definitely that's a budget size probably much larger than anything we would want here, but I'm interested in moving forward. I'm also interested in moving forward on campaign violations and having that as part of it. There's a lot of campaign violations that happen all the time in our city that nothing ever happens with them. And there's one that I had where I had to go through a whole lawsuit over something that was not true. And spend $35,000. I would rather that probably be done by Ethics Commission and be able to kind of figure those things out. So I guess I'm interested in moving forward, but I want us to be careful. I guess, yeah, moving with the county or not. I mean, if we don't have willing partners, that's not good. I also, if we're going to do it with the county, I think it probably should include all the cities and not just the city of Gainesville. If we are going to do a county one with the city, just having it to us, I don't think would be good. But I am interested in moving forward and exploring and looking at all the different ones that are out there. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Very good, thank you. One of the advantages going last is a lot of the good questions get asked already, but let me share my sort of view on moving forward. I definitely want to move this forward. I think it's important. I think it's the right time to do it again because we're in the absence of crisis, and for something like this, that's really crucial. Obviously, the scale is going to be much less. I mean, if we include the county, bringing the other municipalities in separately, that's a workforce of about 3,000 employees. So if you look at that magnitude, I mean, we can very much scale this down. Some of these functions of the IG are being done by the auditor's office. I think there is some, I think we could relieve some of the burden from the auditor's office with some of these functions and allow them to focus on more core responsibilities and sort of simplify what they do. And that would be the sort of investigator role, and then we have, I don't want to get too much into staffing what I think it would look like. I would leave that to our staff to do, but I can see a 2-person staff being able to manage the caseload for this county. It is very important that we move forward with the county. Now, I do believe it's important enough for us to do if they give us a hard no. I mean, I think the city of Gainesville deserves to have this fail-safe as part of what we do. I agree with Adrian so much on the campaign stuff. there were several elections in a row where people ran for this city commission seat that didn't live in Gainesville. Several elections in a row. And there was no incentive not to because there was no consequence for it. I mean, people just kept doing it because, why not? It's, nobody gets in any sort, there's no penalty. And there's all kinds of other campaign violations as well. And because we run our own elections, we have not only the ability, but I would say the responsibility to enforce the election law and codes that we have. So I would want to see that added to it. You know, but for next steps, you know, I would like to throw this back to staff, start looking at structure, start looking at budget and implementation, and I am happy to start meeting with county officials if you want to go that route. We can ask Harvey to do that since he's been sort of shepherding this. That's fine with me. We can put it on a joint meeting, although that might be further down in the, you know, I mean, I think it's better to meet with them, answer questions, you know, let them ask their questions and get comfortable with the idea, and then hopefully there's support for it, and then we can, you know, put it on a joint meeting and work out the details. It would be, you know, my preference, but yeah, it makes so much more sense to do with them, and then you know, just work out a funding ratio. You know, they fund one position, the rest of the municipalities fund the other position, and I think, you know, our staff could work out what makes sense for the 5-member board. I completely agree that it absolutely should be separated from us. You know, that it needs to be an independently appointed and independently functioning commission, and so who are those? You know, I don't. I mean, what y'all did with who you had appoint each member is great, but I'm just looking at it, probably doesn't quite fit with who we are here and who we have access to do those things. But we do. I mean, we've got an incredible community that would be able to appoint a great commission. So we need to figure that part out. What would that look like? What are some suggestions there? So yeah, I love what I've heard. I'm ready to keep this moving forward. You know, at the end of it all, what it does is give the people that live in Gainesville and Alachua County more confidence in their local government and the people that are working for them, and creates a better work product, you know, that comes out of nominally what we 7 do, but more importantly, the other 3,000 people that work for the city and county. I mean, I think that's really where it gets from. So, yeah, I'm excited about what this can add to our local government. There are a couple folks that wanted back in, so Gigi and then Harvey.
Okay, I agree. I think this is something we need to look at moving forward. And I think we also need to get county on board and maybe do a city-county joint board. And I'm really interested in Tallahassee. If we can get them or someone from Tallahassee to come and give us a presentation and talk to us, because we mirror them. And I think if we get a more scaled down presentation, we can have a better insight or a better look on how we should move forward. But it's
Well, I
hard.
think we could do better than Tallahassee.
Of course. Of course. So if we can move forward and somehow try to get someone from Tallahassee to come, I would love to just hear and maybe ask some questions and get a better feel of where we're headed.
Okay, very good.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Helen, I want to say that I totally hear what you're saying. I get it. I am very sensitive to the workload that the commission has and the workload we're giving staff. But the more I thought about this, the more I thought we can't not do this. Because when there's an ethics problem, it's not a question of if, but when. And there will be one down the road at some point. We've had some in the past before most of us were serving. There will be more. And it could stretch up to election issues, and we could certainly, there's plenty of work for it to do that just isn't being done right now. I am not in a rush. I don't need to pass an ordinance next month or anything. I want us to take our time and get it right. But there is definitely a crisis in public faith in government at every level in our country right now. And there's a crisis in faith in government in Gainesville right now. And I think this is one of the ways that we invite people in and say, here's how we're working on that. Come look at what we're doing. Be a part of this with us. So with that in mind, I'm going to move that we charge staff to begin the process of envisioning the next steps for this, for the city of Gainesville, and invite and authorize the mayor to talk with the county commission, with the chair of the county commission to see what they would need to move forward. And for us to move this concept to phases 3 and 4, the timeline development and full staff analysis phases of our policy process.
Okay, motion and second to move the process forward. Helen?
Yeah, so I kind of feel like, to me, if we talk about the issues that we're hoping for this to fix, I feel like we're talking about a tool, but we haven't really talked about what the project is that we want to use this tool on. What are the issues that we're looking at? And what other tools do we already have in our bag before we go buy a $500,000 test project? I agree that there are campaign violations, but is this the only way that you can deal with that? Is there something else that we could do within our city ordinances that would allow for us to deal with those issues? The issue of the community support for the business goes way beyond what this is going to do. We have to get to the core of, what the perception of the public is on what we do. Really is a matter of how well our employees do their work, I think. If we're not dealing with that, they are the face that the public sees out there all the time. And if we are making sure our employees feel like they're taken care of, I kind of feel like this is kind of putting it out there that we don't trust you and we're going to put an extra surveillance on if you're honest or not. And I'm concerned about that reception from our employees. Again, if we're really concerned about the public image, I think there are some other ways to deal about that are more directly seen in public than a facade of a commission. And I'm just really concerned, what we want, is this the right way, or do we need to look a little bit deeper on how we operate? Because we change up here. And a lot of the perception that the public has is who the commission is. It's not going to change the way that people behave in our chambers.
That's not the point.
But the perception of the public is with the services that we provide on a regular basis, and that they know their funds are being delivered to them, that our police department is doing what they need to do, and that we as commissioners are being fiscally responsible. This commission doesn't address the financial burden that we carry every time we do a budget. And I just feel like it's a diversion from, there's so much going on the national level that is just a diversion from what the real problem is. The real problem is we need to work with our citizens better. We really need to work with our citizens to help them be more involved in this civic responsibility. We could put trash cans all over the place, but if people don't use them, we could put police on every corner, but if people still speed, it's a much deeper than just getting another board in place. And I don't know how, I don't know what other community is doing it better. But I don't think this is going to be the solution. I can't support it. I would agree to push it to the county. But for us to be the one, I don't see it. And I won't really support it.
Thank you, Adrian. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
One preliminary, I guess, a question. I think maybe we should send like an official letter to the county and maybe to other municipalities too. I don't want them to feel like they're left out before it's already decided by the time, so I'm maybe sending out a letter to the county and the other municipalities saying that we're exploring this and would like feedback and wanting something in coordination, if that's good.
Sure.
Okay. The second one is, you mentioned staff. I think we should be more perspective of who we're, I think we should say the policy staff who are currently kind of working on it and explain it from there at this point. Just be more solution.
So I agree with that they should drive it, but it's something that needs to move it forward in the proper way. It's going to have to, they're going to have to talk with each other.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And I would specifically charge them, talk to the charge.
Yes.
Ms. Hoffman's pulling out her flow chart there.
We have a couple.
But at this stage is where policy staff, we're just here to do that very preliminary look, and then it would be handed over to the charters. Obviously, this is an issue that would involve all of the charters. So I'm happy to work with Ms. Gainey to figure out the best way forward. But I think at this stage, it needs the deeper dive than my team would provide.
Okay, send a letter.
Send a letter. I don't know which charter would be the one in charges, and I think that's one thing I think making sure that it keeps moving forward. And I guess I think we should also put a date on it coming back in 3 months or something like that. Maybe our next round of general policy.
Do you have a minimum amount of time that you would ask for?
So phase 3 is our timeline development. So that's where if this were assigned to a particular charter, or in this case, sort of everyone, it would come back at a future GPC meeting, ideally the next one or in 2, to sort of lay out what a timeline would look like for work on this. So it would just be a touch point that lays out about how long is expected to really do this deeper dive, the full staff analysis and proposal development. So that's what I would expect to have happen, is that we'll try and gather and have some conversations about what a work plan might look like, and then bring that back and let you know, and then get started.
I guess more questions about kind of our general policy thing. We're already booked up until the end of March, and that's one of my issues with kind of how we're doing general policy. Is we just have something we want to work on, and then it takes forever. So I guess would that come back at just a memo on a thing, or would it come back just on a timeline?
Yes, it would just be a touch point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And no substance would be ready before March anyway.
Okay. Kevin.
Thanks, Mayor. I do want to acknowledge, what Helen said about the employees. I mean, when I'm looking at this, I'm looking at this mainly from the standpoint of us and the way that we're regulated. Because I think we should talk this through. If something happens and one of us does something that is either illegal or unethical, then the process for that is, what's the process for that?
We have to.
Yeah.
Right now.
Right. And that doesn't happen ever, right? And then, I mean, I can think of multiple instances in the past, even in the past few years, where something could have been stopped at this level, but that went on to a different level and had repercussions for the state of Florida.
Well, that's what I'm
Do you know what I mean?
alternative to deal with that.
So that is what I'm most interested in with this discussion. I mean, I think you're right about a lot of this is just really common sense, and I know that our employees have common sense. Do you know what I mean? So it's not that I'm interested in. It's mainly this regulatory body. So I'm interested in having a further conversation, about that specifically. So I do want more information, but it's not to say that I'm going to be supportive of the entire package. I'm most interested in this piece of it.
That was exactly what I was thinking. And I hear you, and I wanted to acknowledge that, but that was the angle I was looking
Well,
at.
that's what I said, what other
Right.
options do we have to
So
deal with
I'm in agreement. Let's get more information, see what other cities,
good with that.
municipalities are doing, and let's just look at everything and figure it out. But that's where I was coming from.
Thank you.
I wanted to point out to you, Mr. Mayor, that, and everyone, we have seen complaints go to the State Board of Ethics. if it's not on fire,
Yeah.
it's not coming back in a hurry from the State Board of Ethics. We are small fry for them. They're good people, and they're working hard, and they're doing good work. They do return, questions promptly, but I would find it useful to have a resource in Gainesville that works for Gainesville or Alachua County. One of the first people that I heard interested in this before I moved forward as a policy proposal was a city staff, not a charter, but several levels down, who just mentioned it to me in conversation that, gee, wouldn't it be cool if we had this? It is not something, I would hope that staff wouldn't take this as a police action, but rather as a faith in government proposal, is what this is to me. It doesn't solve everything. It is not intended to solve everything. It is another piece that we can offer to, I don't know about you, but I know that I have heard dozens over the years of citizens saying, why can't this thing that this person is obviously doing be investigated? And the answer is, well, it has to go to the state attorney's office, or it has to go to the State Board on Ethics. And none of those things are going to happen.
But here again, we're talking about that focus of candidates, campaigns.
No.
No?
No, I'm
You're
not.
talking about
I'm
city
talking about other
employees.
things, yes. Very specifically, commissioners. Not a lot of commissioners, but we have had some commissioners that were pieces of work.
Well, that's what yeah.
And
That's
we have
what-
also had some staffers that folks would have been, probably could work with this. I don't want to go down too long a road. My point is that, yes, there's more work to be done. I want to hear more about what our options are, how we could do this, and how it might best work. We're not going to pass an ordinance today. And I absolutely, it would be tragic for there to be an ethics issue 6 months down the road and us to have said we didn't have time to deal with an ethics board. So, that's all.
Yeah, just appreciate this conversation, because I feel like I've been heard. My concern really is, what are the issues that we're trying to address? And the focus of campaigns, candidates, to have some local recourse with that. Again, my question was, what options are there that we can manage that locally? With any staff person, what is it that they're doing that can't be handled through the HR, audit, equal opportunity office? And again, I don't want to duplicate the process that is already in place. If it's not good enough, are there things that we can do to make it better where it's already in the books? That's my main concern. I think sometimes we go out and we see what other cities are doing, and I'm going to come back and I want to do what that city's doing. You're going to want to come back and do what that city's doing, and that's part of our responsibility. But not everything is the right time and the right place for here. And I just really want us, I'm going to be doing this for the next few months, that when we're talking about things, really pushing, how our budget is. Because there's got to be some stuff that we're going to have to cut. Or our utility bills are going to have to go up. Or our taxes are going to have to go up. And we've got to find a better way. We just got to find a better way to either shift some of the things that aren't as necessary back here in the past establishment foundation and move newer things that we really want to do. But I'm concerned about our resources and finances, and really just come back to that question, what's the priority? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I hear your opinions on the employees. I do think it's important that employees are a part of it for a couple of reasons. We can call the state ethics board and we can get an answer on any ethical issue that we want. Employees don't have that. There's no option for that, for them to be able to get any guidance on any ethical issues. They may not want to, maybe it's with their supervisor, and they don't want to go to the supervisor about some ethical issue because it might be with them. So, and also I think the gift laws is another thing. Our employees are the ones who are deciding on RFPs and giving the recommendations that go up to us. Yes, we make the final decision, but in all essence, those decisions are made much further down about what the recommendations are. And I think it's important to find out what are the gifts people are receiving, and making sure that our public has trust in our elected officials, but also all of our employees. So I strongly believe that we should include all employees and all public officials. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I'll be brief. Really quickly, are we even able to put campaign, enforcement of campaign law into an ethics board?
Miami-Dade did it.
Okay, so it can be done.
We could in this circumstance, because it would be our ethics board with our this, and we run our own campaigns. So if we wanted to do that, we could.
Okay, well, I think that's a fantastic thing, number one. Bottom line, I think what this does is it does the same thing that the Florida Commission on Ethics does. It makes it very clear where you can go if you have a question or if you have a complaint. Right now, that's not very, very clear, depending on circumstances. So this makes it very clear, and we don't have to make it as large or extensive as the Palm Beach County. But I will say this, because I know that now that we're live in general policy, we have much more viewers at home, including what I would guess are some county commissioners. We need the county commission on this. We need the Elijah County Commission on this. So I will vote for the motion. And I really, really hope that that invitation is accepted enthusiastically, and not just in word, but also in dollars.
I would like to add a question to Commissioner De Santos' comment about employees, if they're accepting gifts, if the research would include if there isn't already a process to deal with that. Again, redundancy doesn't need to be the cause for this commission. Let's get a commission, if it's going to be done, focused on what nothing else in the city can do.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Mr. Bannon needs to depart.
Great.
Thank you all for inviting me.
Gas for you on the corner.
I just don't want to. I don't want the meter to run out and get a ticket.
Oh,
I know, but
That's an
we all. Thank you all.
We appreciate the
Thank you.
Thank you all for the discussion. I'm excited about this. I really, I wish this would have happened decades ago, but I'm looking forward to the information we get back from staff and the charter evaluation. Apparently there are a couple dumpsters on fire somewhere because my phone's blowing up. I need to return this call real quick. So we will open it up for public comment. We have a new lectern up there, and there's the clock and everything. I'm going to pass the gavel to the pro tem, and hopefully I'm back before the next time, but if not, go ahead and start that.
Was there a second for motion?
Yes.
A second. You second, thank you.
Mr. Cameron, let's welcome. Mr. Cameron?
The mayor and the city manager are both out. It's unethical to ask me to go forward with both of those influential people out of the room. I will, if necessary. Who is the mayor pro tem?
I'm the mayor pro tem. Please go ahead.
Okay, my concern, I certainly support everything that Commissioner Warren and Commissioner Johnson have said, but more importantly, I think it's critical that this discussion go before the city commissions and go before the public. It's unethical, in my mind, to proceed with this small an audience without, this is a legal matter, due process notice. And I would say that it's very important on this important journey that you start there. I certainly would support any letter that goes to the county, any procedure, but anything that gets staff, et cetera, moving on this broad topic, I consider absolutely a violation of legal process, because you have to have some kind of reasonable notice. I'm surprised again that you all even consider motions at General Policy Committee meetings that affect the public. You come back at some later stage and suddenly the public is confronted with an issue of ethics that they never even heard of. I mean, there are clearly a handful of us here from the public, but that was no notice of any kind. Now, again, especially, I don't know which journalists are here, which papers are here. If this will immediately go out to the public, I wouldn't object. But the idea that this can simmer on a back table and don't take into account the reservations that at least 3 commissioners have expressed this afternoon is a major concern to me. Finally, I want to make one point. You do have an avenue. You can claim that 9 attorneys, assistant attorneys, are busy with everything and they couldn't take on this responsibility. You can get what you want done started with an assistant city attorney unless a city attorney shall says that's not possible. You can at least begin to get the structure with a legal framework done. Thank you for the time.
Next speaker, please. Welcome.
Hey, thank you. My name is Jason Foltz, and just a quick logistical thing. Somebody new to this big and large room sitting in the very back. I don't know if it'd be possible to have one of these big things for the folks here, but it's kind of hard to see with this little screen if you're kind of in the back of the room. So anyway, I just want to throw that out there. Especially today, because this is like the most exciting agenda for a general policy meeting that I've seen in a while. I'm really enthusiastic about everything that's on your agenda today. So I just want to say, I think that ethics reform and campaign finance and these sorts of good government type things tend to be everybody's like second priority. You know, we're like, we think it's really important, but there's all these other things that we have to deal with. So it's everybody's second priority, including mine, until it's not, you know, until it becomes blowing up in your face kind of priority. And so to me, at this time, when we really have what is, in my opinion, a pretty dream commission, and I say that in all sincerity, I think now is exactly the time to be dealing with this. And I'm really glad that you all are talking about this and starting to move this forward. Because I know all of you, having been here and paying attention to local politics in the past 10 plus years, it's not always the case. And getting something like this to move forward under different commissions when it maybe was really more needed would have been a complete non-starter. So thank you for getting it started. I also just want to say that I think what this does, beyond just establishing, strengthening good governance here locally, is that it starts to set a baseline for how people should expect government to work. Not only in this community, but in other communities. And if we can begin to build this idea that people should expect honesty and accountability at the local level, and that becomes a real expectation that people have, we might be able to establish the same thing at the state level. And God forbid, at the national level. Imagine what some of those conversations could look like right now if we had a populace in this country that actually had the experience of accountable, effective local government. And then lastly, I just want to say I absolutely think the county should be involved heavily in every step of the process. And if you need any help getting some county commissioners to bring this up higher on their priority list, there's one little citizen here that's more than happy to do whatever I can to bring him along on that. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Next speaker, please. Okay, then we'll come back to the commission. We'll wait for there.
Did you restate the motion?
Sure. The motion is for staff to begin the process of envisioning what this will look like for the city of Gainesville for this concept and move on to phases 3 and 4 of our policy process, which are timeline development and full staff analysis, proposal development, and to authorize the mayor to reach out to the county commission via letter or phone and/or phone.
Well, I think the thing was a letter, and we'd send them to all the municipalities as well.
There you go.
Can I make a friendly amendment to include weighing the benefits of doing it focused on to the elected officials and candidates versus the whole city?
My intent is to weigh everything possible as
I did, but if it's not in writing, it's not it. It's not
Okay,
it.
so one option in the staff analysis will be exempting city employees that are not elected. That's what you're asking for, right?
That would be, yeah, that'd be great. If there's a seconder with, or well, the maker of the motion.
You know, honestly, I don't feel comfortable with that. I need it to be
Okay, then.
everybody.
All right.
Okay, so everyone clear on the motion? Okay, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes 6-1 with Warren in dissent. Okay, thank you. On to the next item, public, yes.
I guess I don't know if we have more people here for the third item than we do for public finance. I don't know if they're
Can you give me a how you doing if you're here for the third item, that's the living wage requirement for contractors? A lot of our staff is doing. Yes, let's take that up next. That's fine. Is there any objection?
No.
Okay, so Madam Clerk, we're going to take up 180999, living wage requirements for contractors. Next, who do we have here? Anybody from staff for this? Or is this just us? Yeah.
There was a,
Go ahead.
I believe, back in, when was it, January, December, November, I don't know, we asked for information back on the costs of doing it, and for all of, so both DRU and general government, it was to get the cost of implementing this.
Okay, so Mr. Feldman, welcome to the commission for an item you were not yet hired to shepherd. And who do we have here from, like, we got Mr. Shepherd. Mr. Shepherd, okay. Yeah, why don't you join us? If we don't have the information we need, that's problematic, but.
This brief open. So, Mayor, Commissioners, so I met with our staff over the last few days when we saw this put on the GPC agenda to try to figure out what we're supposed to bring back here. And we can, and I'll speak just for the general government side, we can bring you back numbers, but a little bit more definition in terms of, do you want everything? So, for example, we have a catering service that caters during hurricanes on there. They prepare prepared meals. Are we talking about all their staff that is preparing the meals? Or are we talking about the staff that that brings the meals to us and hands them out in the box? Are we still talking about just contracts that are above 100,000 annually? Are we? We're trying to figure out what the spend is. I mean, we've done some rough calculations, and I will tell you that we think the impact to general government could be about $1 million a year. Just our temporary service contract is about $350,000 a year. We have folks from procurement that can talk a little bit about the methodology that they use to get to those numbers, but without getting specific definitions from the commission as to what areas you want this living wage to apply to, it's hard for us to give a number. There are some vendors that are very low threshold, FedEx, for example. Are we going to put a living wage requirement in Federal Express? If so, how do we monitor that? How do we enforce it and things along that line? That's general government's perspective.
Yeah, Bill.
Bill Shepherd, GRU. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. Pretty much in the same thing. I think there's some uncertainty still as to whether we're going to, if the desire is to mimic the county ordinance as well, which it really applies it to everything, every contract that they have, or do we set a threshold and do above that threshold for ours? So we also did some rough calculations based on our FY18 numbers and the impact to us, depending on whether or not we're covering the benefit side or not, is $600,000 to $2 million a year. And that's going to roll in slowly over the course of the 4 years as contracts fall off and other ones start up. So, and I've got my procurement folks here as well that can speak to some specifics if you have questions. But again, I looked at the item as being a discussion amongst ourselves to see where we want to go next and set us on that path.
Okay, and my recollection is that we wanted alignment with the county ordinance. We might not, I have to go back and look at the recording to see if we gave specific direction to do that. My recollection was that that was what we did. So I think that gives the answer, and if that wasn't clear, then perhaps we can try to be more clear today. But that at least gives you exactly what you need to do your calculations. We had Adrian and then Gigi.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And yes, it was a specific motion that was made at that meeting. So I think when you're talking about FedEx, no. I'll at least give my thoughts. FedEx, no. I think more for me are the services that are being provided, in essence, kind of on site. It's like janitorial services, construction services that are being done on our property. For security guards that we have, I think those are the ones. Those are what I'm more looking for, is service-related ones, and ones that are going out, I think, for RFPs. I'm open to going to $0, or what is our threshold to go for public RFP? Is it $50,000? Is that kind of
For which, sir?
for an RFP that has to go out to? There's different. There's like if you're under $2,000, like the person can just go pay for it. There's like 10,000. What are those thresholds?
So go ahead.
Well, anything up to $5,000 does not require any sort of solicitation, competitive solicitation. The policy says that above 5,000, up to 50,000, at least 3 bids or quotes, one of which must be from a small or service-disabled veteran business, if feasible. Above 50,000, it calls for a competitive solicitation through our office in general government. So we would issue an RFP, RFQ, invitation to bid, etc.
And then for GRU, what are your limits?
Okay, we have the same. If it's above 50,000, we have to go out for a formal bid process.
And then the 5,000 is the same as well?
Yes, P card up to 5,000, no competitive bids.
Okay.
And the county's requirement for their living wage is at 50,000.
Yes, it's 50,000.
Yeah. So I would be interested in getting analysis at 0, 5,000, and 50,000. I don't know if there'd be much of a difference. I don't know how many under 5,000 new ones we're doing for services. Maybe it is better just to go over 50,000 because that's when we're actually doing more contracted services. But mainly I want ones that are services that directly competing in essence against a job that we might hire for. It's kind of more of the threshold that I'm looking for. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Gigi.
Thank you. So I'm going to have to just, Adrian, just remind you of what we asked for, and that's a little different than what you just stated of what you were wanting to see. If you all have your agendas, if you could turn to page 3, item number 18099, the 3rd paragraph, the beginning of the 3rd sentence. And if you read beginning at that sentence, it says in particular that it would apply to all services purchased by the city regardless of dollar value. And that's what we asked for. And it's in the agenda. So, and it also states that we will be examining the anticipated impacts, including specifically how it may affect volume of bids received, cost increases, and the administrative burdens, other effects it may have on small women and minority-owned businesses. In addition, staff is considering further clarification on what it means to have a contract with the city and who is directly involved in providing a service to the city. So my question is, do we have any of that updated information?
So point of clarification, when I gave that 600,000 to $2 million impact, that was based on the county's structure of their program. It was not, right, it wasn't an arbitrary threshold.
It was based on their structure, but we took the 50,000 off. We
Right.
had it for 0 up.
We did everything. Yeah.
So it was everything?
Correct. It was everything.
Okay. What about general government side?
The number that we're looking at is about $1 million with everything.
Okay, so, Mayor and colleagues, I'm assuming we don't have anything, for us to really look at this time, and we have people here that came today to hear something and see something, and you can't offer them anything, so I don't know where we go from here.
Well, let's get any other questions on the table. Let's hear from the folks that are here to speak to this item, and then let's reiterate the ask that we made last time. Commissioner, and I'll get you. And you. Okay.
Mr. Mayor. So we asked for this on June 20th, the last time we discussed it. And that was a kick forward from before I was even on the commission. I recognize that it creates financial repercussions. We want to know what those are so we have all the information to make the decision. I'll tell you, my decision is made, and we're going to have to work around what the repercussions are. This is income inequality we're talking about. This is how we address it in our community. It is the biggest stick we have to do that with right now. I recognize that is not a priority for everybody, but I think it's a priority for everybody on this commission. I can't be more clear than saying this matters to us. We want to take action. We've got to have numbers to take action so that we know what the repercussions of our action are. I can't be more clear than that. We want to do this, but we have to see the numbers first. I'm sorry that I wasn't that clear in June if I wasn't. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Helen.
The $1 million is the answer to the question, isn't it?
It's a swag number. I mean, part of it is, we don't know today what our vendors are paying.
You can only speculate.
Right. So we're looking at BLS data that is out there for Gainesville, and we're trying to make some comparisons without actually knowing what
It's your best estimate.
what Business A is going to pay. And so we can
That's,
give you.
my point
yeah.
is that I'm hearing you giving us a number to what the cost would be and the impact would be, what the best information you have available.
And it may be wrong.
And it may be wrong. I mean, you're asking for a speculation on, we don't know what the vendors do. We can only estimate. And that's what I'm hearing the staff say they brought to us. So,
Did you want to add to that?
Well, and we narrowed it down to the categories that were affected by this, okay? And then we got the total from those categories based on spend information that we have, okay? Which 2019 really isn't closed out yet, so our spend is based on 2018. So but 2019 spend wasn't much different, so we can assume, all we can do is assume that the spend will be similar, okay? And in 2020, it might be similar, okay? But the categories could change slightly. I mean, so it would be just an estimate at this point based on information that we currently have. But it is an estimate.
and so the other question I had with that being the information that I was rolling around in my head, that it was related to the impact. If we were to move forward, for everybody to be, all the businesses to have staff at a $15 minimum, I would wonder how would it spread out if we did something like a 50,000 requirement for the $15 an hour, because my interest, and my question to me would be, how are small businesses going to be impacted when we talk about their challenges with getting going? Minorities, I would love to think that a lot of these small businesses will be able to pay their employees $15 an hour, but what if that doesn't fit with their business model? That that somehow what we want to find a way to find these individuals who are trying to work into it. But I don't want to put a barrier there that they're not even going to knock on the door for us to be able to say, and when they knock on the door, we need to have something available to say, okay, you're on the right track, and we understand that currently you can't pay everybody $15 an hour. Maybe it's a family business. Maybe they're just happy to have $30,000 a year come into their home, but they want to build it. I don't want that to be the thing that keeps the door closed. And I would be open to looking at this with what we've done in the last budget year with bringing the total rewards up, to look at, what's the next phase. I am comfortable with not trying to get everything at one time. I'm comfortable with looking at a plan process to say, let's look at what the next notch is. But I would need to know how much of a difference would that make with needing to increase our budget, and we did to a 50,000 break point. Does that make sense? To what, like if you could split up the...
It makes sense, but the one caveat is we still don't know what entities are paying today. We've got some economic data, so we can make a guess. But for example, when I met with staff today, I said, tell me about our contract with WCA, right, for waste hauling, because maybe my implicit bias is that waste haulers aren't making living wages, but it turns out that that contract is required, and they're all making living wages. So
above 15.
Above 15 on there. So that, that's a good thing, right? But I can't tell you for certain what our vendors that are not under the current ordinance are paying their employees. If they're paying their employees $15 an hour living wage, then it's not going to have any impact on us. If they're not, then by requiring that, they'll have to make a decision. Do they want to do business with the city? Okay, and the answer may be no. And if the answer is yes, they do want to continue to do business with the city, then it will cost us more, but I don't know how much more. Is some of their profit going to come down so that they can still be competitive? Or are we going to pay the full cost burden of those, that increase in wage?
Right.
Because maybe now they're less competitive with somebody who is already paying a living wage, and they may have gotten the business before, but they won't get it now, right? So there's all these intangibles that are out there. So give you a number and tell you that I think this is the real number, you can't do that.
And I think with when we look at our full realm of who we do contracts with, most of those impacts are going to be from those that are 50,000 and up, as far as if there were some that were off. The one, just by sheer volume of what we pay in those two categories, that, we're in the millions above 50,000, and we're in the hundreds of thousands under 5,000.
Yeah, keep in mind that at least on our side of the shop, and Diane's here, so she can correct me on this, but most of our spend is salary, fringes, and benefits, right, on there. The other, so the spend where that would be from between 0 and 100,000 isn't a lot. So the fiscal impact on the general government side will be something, but I don't think it would be unmanageable, right? And the best way, in my opinion, to do it is do it and let us adjust on the run, because I can't give you a number that we can stand behind things certain.
Yeah, that's the hard part. Anyway, just how I'm thinking about it. And, I agree that we want to move everybody forward. We want to get people to be able to pay their rent, buy their food. I just do know that when I had a business, I just worry about those who are just getting started in our family operations.
Adrian and Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the small business argument and being competitive or not, this most likely would be a pass-on cost. Most likely it would be passed on to the city, and we would pay, in essence, a higher rate. But also, if someone's paying a poverty wage and someone else is going to pay a living wage, and yes, you may be a small business, you should raise what you're paying. I think that's kind of a weird kind of, I mean, I understand the logic of it, but then it gets a fallacy like, oh, well, and also you're only paying the living wage on work being done for the city. So if you're doing multiple different jobs, say you're doing lawn work, if you're doing lawn work for some corporation, you can pay them whatever you want to pay them. We are pretty different in the state of Florida from doing that, but if they're working on city work, they do that. They put that into their bid. That's why I think it's important that we include everyone so that everyone gets moved up. If we don't include the small businesses, then our people who work for local companies won't get paid as much. And I think those are ones that probably should get paid more if that money gets even more circulated than stuff that goes off to the larger corporations. Yes, I know we're not going to have the exact cost, but I do want to see the estimates. I want to see the backup behind how you got the estimates. Just hearing a number is difficult. I want to find out what were the assumptions that you made for those. And this has been going on for 2.5 years. I made 3 or 4 motions, I think, on this one, or second on this item. So I think I would like to get this information back by like March 1st. We don't have to have a meeting about it, but just have the information to us, and then we can schedule it for a general policy in quarter 2. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Thank you. My biggest concern is very much attached to the conversation right now. That number is going to change every year. That number is going to always change. And my biggest concern is we spend all this time pushing this ordinance, and we put everyone under it. But if we don't have a reliable and accurate mechanism to know what companies are paying their employees, how are we going to know that their employees are being paid a living wage? Cost of the contract is going to go up. That's for sure when this ordinance gets passed. But how do we know that that money that we're paying is actually going to the employees who are supposed to be paid a living wage? And without that assurance, I do have concerns about the ordinance. I want to see this succeed, but what I don't want is I don't want to send everyone, is when someone says, Mike, they're not paying me a living wage, and all we do is we send them to the Alachua County wage theft. I don't want that to be the result of this ordinance, is that I want this to have a good reporting mechanism. And I know that's out of work, I realize that. But to me, if we're gonna raise our expenditures for a reason, we need to be sure that that is the very reason why we're paying that money.
Company profits.
Yeah, and that's a valid point, and I do believe that Central Labor Council has some thoughts on that, and I've had a discussion, I know, with some folks about that side of it, because that is important. I mean, if this is paying more to line the pockets without the benefit going to the people we're trying to help, then we're missing the target immensely.
Cut back hours.
But I think there are some ways to account for that, so I think we'll hear from them during public comment. I'm sorry, go ahead.
If I may, just one last point to Commissioner Warren's point. I do want to see this for all businesses, but I am sensitive to the one exception in the sense that if small businesses are put in a position where they're no longer going to bid for city contracts, and those contracts make up, small businesses rely on a handful sometimes of very key contracts and very key relationships. And if we price them out and they can no longer be working with the city, then we're working against ourselves. And I don't think that's the direction we got to go either. So I'm not completely opposed to situational exceptions for businesses that simply cannot. And that goes back to the proper reporting mechanism that I'm looking for.
Thank you. And Commissioner Ariola, your concern was the commission's concern. We were all concerned about, will the employee, will they actually get paid? And we had a very heavy conversation about it, to the point that we directed staff, and if you look in your backup, to, in the last sentence, in the 3rd paragraph, it says, if violations in providing service to the city, who should violations be reported to, and who within the city would handle investigations. So we gave them the direction to wherever our concern was, if they violated, if we had concerns about it, to come back to us with some type of solutions or some type of scenario, let the commission know that if indeed something like that took place, who would handle that? So we've asked staff to come back with those, with that. We were all concerned about that, and that's a major part of this. So, you know, I feel like we're just talking in circles. And I had this conversation with you and Commissioner with the Digital Access Committee. When we asked for something, it just seemed like of late, you know, I think everybody's probably, you know, overwhelmed. So I don't know, and I'm getting older by the minute. I don't know, but you know, I don't know if it is me. I don't know. But you know, we asked for certain things, and this is not the first time. And you know, I'm just really disappointed that yet again we have people from the public coming here to hear an item to engage with the commission, and we have nothing for them. You know, so I'm concerned. I'm concerned.
Yeah, thanks. And so let me sort of present the good and the bad, and then there's no ugly. You know, I think we're frustrated. I think we expected certain information and more information than we got today, and that's the frustration we're hearing. We appreciate that you sort of are ready with some numbers on the cuff or off the cuff, and I trust their accuracy. I mean, I think it sounds to me like you've done the work and put the pencil to the paper, but you know, we didn't have that ahead. We weren't able to look at it, ask follow-up questions of our charters if we wanted to, and so that's the frustration. Now the good is that regardless, we simply need to have something adopted and ready for staff by the time we get to approving a budget, because this isn't going to go into effect until October 1. And so, you know, what we would like to have already made the decision, so staff can be incorporating that into your financial planning. Nonetheless, whatever it is, you know, it's that, you know, I think, you know, Mr. Shepherd, you sort of have described a couple times, this is going to be a gradual thing over 4 years with GRU because we're in existing contracts. And so once the, you know, ripcord is pulled by the commission, you'll be able to more specifically look, okay, what contracts come due when, and how is that going to phase in, which will help, you know, you and Mr. Pilarski and everybody else involved, you know, do the revenue requirement and an eventual rate recommendation. And same thing on city government. But we really, really want to have everything that we need to move forward, take a vote, move forward, and sort of get this memorialized and just part of standard operating procedure. I mean, that's what the commission wants. And I just think what you're hearing from folks is we were hoping to be ready to do that, and there just wasn't the information we thought we were going to be getting to do that. So we're ready to move forward. I think similar to the other item, we don't necessarily need to see this on our next agenda. We need the information. You can send that out via memo, so we can just go through and look at that, especially in comparison to the county and how those things align, understand the numbers that we're talking about. I appreciate, Mr. Feldman, your advice that we're not going to have a hard number. So if this is the desire, let it be known, and then you'll start working internally to get best. I mean, budgets are estimates, right? I mean, we're going to best estimate every year. The budget's an estimate, and so we'll work our best to best estimate those costs, and you'll bring those to us in your eventual budget recommendations. So I think that's where we are. And we'll get a motion here, but repeat the previous motion. But you know, that we just need that data back as best you can deliver it, so we see it in front of us, and then you know, we'll when we get that, we'll put it on an agenda. And it can be, it doesn't have to be a general policy. We could put that on an afternoon agenda on a city commission meeting where we sometimes have a little bit more responsibility and get this moved forward. Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question on, because the information that we had was, it was based on the Alachua County, and in there is $13.50 without, I mean, with benefits. If they have benefits, it's $13.50 is the pay, and then $15.60 if they don't offer benefits, the company that we hire, okay? So I'm hearing $15. Is this changing because we need to know?
No. The language was that nobody would be paid less than the lowest paid city employee. And so we're marking it to the living wage for the city, which I think is at $13.75 right now, correct?
I believe that's correct.
Yeah, I mean, we agreed to go up 50 cents a year, so we're at $13.75. Assuming we pass the budget with that same agreement next year, it'll be at $14.25. And so that's the, I mean, the eventual goal was $15 an hour, but we're on this annual path to move it up there incrementally at 50 cents.
And whether they have benefits or not, just it's going up that. Because before we split it up by not having benefits, and the county splits it up by not having benefits offered and by having benefits offered. So if it's just one figure, that's going to change how we figured a little bit too, so.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think you're gonna have to, and it would probably be helpful to us to see both. But the language was marked towards the lowest paid city employee, that no contracted would be paid less than the lowest paid city employee. That's the key. Do you want to put a motion on the floor, or do you want to take public comment first?
Public comment.
Okay, can members of the public speak to the item, and then after we hear from you, we'll come back and get a motion on the floor. Welcome.
I'm only a one-noted speaker about race. I will tell you right now, there's a voice missing from this discussion. And there's a good reason why that voice is missing. And that is your equal opportunity director, who supposedly is responsible for data on the number of minorities and women participating in bidding. It's atrocious, I guess. I don't have the data because that department, since Tory Alston, even in his time, never provided the data. We only know at that point, it was, for example, less than 2% were blacks, minority contractors. You need the data because it's going to guarantee whatever you set up, that it will lower the number and participation of minority and perhaps women contractors as well. That is you need that part of the discussion vitally. It's data that's included, and it's not going to come from the city manager or anywhere else except your charter officer responsible for you. The next thing I would like to point out, never mind the complexities your city manager has pointed out, subcontractors will be hired who will not be accountable regardless of how you structure it. A good contractor will figure out how to use an expert worker or group and pay them whatever he or she wants to pay. But I want to stay with that minority issue. I'd be outraged if you did not include, and I certainly will raise it at every meeting possible, the data necessary about minority and women participation. As far as I know, it hasn't been done for 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Commissioners, Mayor Jeremiah Tattersall with the Florida AFL-CIO. Thank you for bringing this conversation forward. I do have a few corrections. This was actually first referred to by then Mayor Ed Brady. This has been going on for a long time. Y'all, we're not reinventing the wheel here. The county's had a living wage ordinance for 4 years. They call it the government minimum wage ordinance. It's in effect. All these questions have been answered through theirs. They didn't use BLS data to estimate the cost. They asked their vendors how much it cost. They got on the phone and called them. And then a lot of them said that they already paid and it wouldn't affect them at all. That was taken care of that way. Some money was set aside when it passed in 2016. and when it passed, there was some cost pass-throughs, and it wasn't a problem really. There has been some shifting around, some insourcing and stuff. As far as enforcement, employees are given a big piece of paper that says that as you're working on this job, you are entitled to this wage. If you're not receiving it, please contact this number. There haven't been any problems with that. I know anecdotally a few workers, custodial workers, that were very, very happy to find that they were receiving a higher pay. They went from making $8 and something while they're working on other places like at the library, and when they're cleaning up county buildings, Board of County Commission buildings, they were making, at the time it was like $12.75 an hour, and it was a major improvement to their lives because of that, and that's the point. The things that we would like to see with the county, that the county ordinance does, and it does it really well. They just came out with their compliance thing. I think they did like $12 million or something in things that would have been covered under this contract. It's $50,000 or more with the covered services and everything. All but $2 million were covered, so it was about $10 million versus $2 million that weren't covered. The ones that weren't covered were 501c3s, and the reason the 501c3s weren't covered is that was an argument that was made back when that happened. But what they did do is they had the entities come before them and say why they can't pay a living wage. And because of that pressure, Grace Marketplace, Meridian has made huge strides. They had people making like down at 8 something an hour. They're pushing up to like 10, 15 hours last I saw, and that's because of the pressure that the county commission has been putting on them. We've been working on this for a long time. I don't know what y'all been doing. I'm sorry. It's been a long time. I mean, when we're mentioning Mayor Ed Brady initiating a conversation about this, it gets comical. We've been working on this a long time, and the city has made huge strides. I emailed out kind of this history and what the exemptions are. I have 2 seconds. I'm out of time. I do have another point to make.
Thank you. Now, I have to be equitable to everybody. Thank you, Mr. Tattersall. You can pass along to one of your other comrades there if you want to make sure it gets out.
Will do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Sheila Payne with the Alachua County Labor Coalition. Once again, at the Gainesville Housing Authority, I went behind Kali and I sounded like an idiot. So since Jason or Jeremiah, they're always better speakers. But I do want to, after Jeremiah already said, this has been going on for years. I just want to say the reasoning, I feel like it's backward reasoning that it will impact minority-owned businesses. Those are people like when the enterprise zones that we meet with. Those are the people that I feel that we most want to represent. They deserve to make a living wage. And so the pass-through costs, if those contractors, if they are told, we need you to pay a living wage, that's part of the cost of the contract. Those are the people. The whole equity thing that we're doing, the wonderful event last night, the presentations, it is about equity. This is the only way we're going to lower the poverty level in Gainesville, is to start paying people more. It really starts the pay, and then with better housing. Yeah, part of it for the county, I think here could be run out of Equal Opportunity Office, any complaints. That's how it's the county, and also with wage theft, they didn't actually have to hire any more people to take care of that stuff. I do think people will report. In the past, when we started this in 2015, there were contracts that the city had where janitorial services actually had like 15 bogus names. It was actually one big company that was using different names so that they could be under the limit. There really should not be a limit. If someone has 5 workers, those workers all deserve to be able to feed their kids, and I think that's what we all. And as far as quickly the $2.10 an hour for benefits, that's just for health care. People deserve to have health coverage for their families. And I think even like for the, you know, the organizations like the school board that are not making strong enough strides towards a living wage, what they say is we have good health benefits. So as part of the contract, it has to have something for health benefits. Thanks.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
My name is Dan Harmeling, and I consider it a very opportune time to let you know that this issue of poverty and low wages has been around for a long time. And I have 3 pages that I'm not going to read to you, but I will tell you that when the discussion first started, and I guess the representatives of the City Commission came, one individual said, do we really want to mimic what the County Commission has done? I thought I should have heard the words, should we follow the leadership of the County Commission? Because that's what we're looking at. We're looking at being leaders. But let me go back a ways, and it's not going to take time to introduce what I'm going to do, and then I'm just going to hand everybody a copy of this. Statement to be read at the Gainesville City Commission meeting Monday, July 12th, 1965. So let's go back 55 years and see if we're still dealing with this. And let's find out, maybe this has something to do with a way to think about reparations, reconciliation, something about the history of what's been going on in this community, and now we're trying to make some progress, and hopefully we're at the point where we're actually doing it, because I sense that this is happening. But I'll just read the first sentence and then leave the rest of the reading to you. It says, and another matter concerning living conditions. I wish to speak about the rummage sales of old clothing. I was appointed chairman of a committee at the Alachua County NAACP meeting last Monday night for the purpose of investigating rummage sales that take place every Saturday morning at West and Northwest 5th Avenue and 6th Street. That's near the police station. And as you read through this, you'll understand why. We had organizations that would come and sell their old clothing, white organizations, because black people just didn't have the money to buy stuff new. So they'd sell it. And this money that these white organizations would raise would go on to put their annual social events on. So they made some profit. But this is how we handled it then, and now we're talking about something maybe we can do now. And I think hopefully as you read through this, it might let you know that it's been going on a long time.
Thank you.
One name I'll give you as I pass this out is Consul Bly. Does anybody ring a bell with Consul Bly? Consul and me and my former wife, Mary Lou Harmon. I've got more copies. If I'm running out, I'll
Thanks, and I'm afraid you've also run out of your time.
Okay,
but thank
I'm not
you.
going to say another word.
And we'll thank Mr. Harmon for being with us today. And could I have the next speaker up, please?
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hi, thanks. I'm Jason Foltz, former minimum wage worker, current teacher for adult education students, that many of my students work minimum wage jobs. Those students have kids themselves that they're trying to take care of. And so this is a super important and personal issue to me. And I just want to make kind of 2 really quick points, hopefully. One is I absolutely support the city incentivizing small business, minority-owned business, women-owned businesses. I think that that's super important that we do that. We don't do that by allowing them to pay poverty wages to their workers. We do that by being proactive about working with those businesses and helping those businesses help their workers to make a living wage. I think that's critically important that we keep that in mind. Last thing I'll just say, I really appreciated the event last night, and there were 2 statements that really stuck out to me at that event. One was, everyone in this community deserves a living wage. And second, we have to start in our own house. right? Those are two things that I heard said last night that really struck me, and I think that I can't really think of a much better way to be doing that than the things that the city has already done with its own workforce in terms of raising wages, and now we need to take the next step with that. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Welcome, Ms. Primack.
Hello, I'm Alice Primack, here as a citizen to thank you for working on this and to say that I certainly support this issue and support what the Alachua County Labor Coalition is asking for. I think of the quotation, none of us is really okay until we're all okay. And I like that I hear things you're saying that I think you take that to heart, and I appreciate that. I hope you'll pass these updates so that we are helping to make everyone have at least a living wage.
Thank you. Could I have the next speaker, please? Anybody else here to speak on this item? Okay, back to the commission. Commissioner Summers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to put on a motion very similar to one passed in June of 2019. Move that we direct the city attorney to draft an ordinance for further discussion by the commission, not first reading, that mirrors the minimum wage requirements in Alachua County's ordinance with further revisions as follows. Apply to all service contracts within the city regardless of dollar value. Set the living wage as the wage paid to the lowest paid city employee plus $2.10 if no insurance is provided by the contractor. And apply the new requirement to contracts solicited by the city after October 1st, 2020. The second part of the motion is to get information that we would get the estimated financial impact of the ordinance. Also looking at how it may affect the volume bids received, cost increases and administrative burden or other effects it may have on small women or minority-owned businesses. And the third portion is that we have this to the commission by memo by March 15th.
Is there a second? Motion second?
Second, I'm sorry, but I just want to also add to, where would it be housed, if we have any complaints or anything?
Oh, and then the fourth portion is that city staff come back with recommendations on who should violations be reported to and who they should be handled, where the investigation should happen.
Okay, second. Okay. Okay, any further questions? All right, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Take
That motion passes unanimously. What's that?
No public comment on the motion?
No, we've started taking public comment before we craft the motion to be able to incorporate public comment into the motion. But I did want to, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know the right word, but for the incredible record keeping from Mr. Harbley. That's amazing. I mean, I'm like, this is going in a special spot in my office to remind me the value of keeping important documents for more than half a century. That's pretty amazing. Thank you all for being here. We appreciate it. Again, we should get an update relatively soon, and then I would expect this to be on a regular city commission agenda to sort of finally move it forward once we get that information back. So, but we'll keep you posted. Yeah.
I just want to ask staff, because it's always been a question of you don't understand exactly what we're asking for. Is it clear from the different charter officers or the different GRU, city attorney's office, and general government of what we're looking for?
You're basically saying mimic the county, their categories, basically, that
Yes.
they use.
In terms of the service, yes.
In terms of the services that would be impacted.
But it would include all contracts instead of theirs, it's given lots of exemptions.
I'm sorry?
It would include all the contracts that, they do a limit of $50,000, this would be less.
Yes.
Zero.
And Madam Clerk, if you would just forward the official motion to all the charters once you have that finalized.
And all services too.
Zero and
Okay.
50,000.
Next item is public campaign financing. Thank you all. Appreciate the conversation. Okay, very good. Sophia, welcome back.
Are you waiting for us?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner Ward, did you want to introduce the topic?
Briefly, this is another one of those ideas that citizens asked me about. Actually, the first conversation I had about it on the municipal level was more than 3 years ago with Mr. Tattersall and Mr. Foltz, who are here today. And I'm glad that we're finally able to have a discussion about it. The research you've done is pretty broad across America. And I'm interested to hear what my colleagues have to say about this. I have some ideas about it, but I don't want to hear what you think going forward. And before you start, I want to head something off the past. The problem I'm trying to solve as I think about this is how we get more people involved in running for office. How we lower the barriers for people becoming a city commissioner, very specifically, through this particular vehicle.
So it's not that you're trying to get out of cul de
Too late for me.
Okay. Ms. Hoffman.
Thank you. Lindsay Hoffman, Policy Oversight Administrator. As I mentioned before we began our ethics presentation, I just wanted to remind the Commission where we are in the scope of the policy process. We're still here in phase 1 and 2, very early in information gathering, just here to introduce an idea to you and offer some research and foundation and background information so that we're all speaking the same language as we explore this topic. So I will turn it over to our fellow Sophia Corrigan.
Hi again. So I will be talking to you guys now about publicly funded finance campaigns. And so in jurisdictions where a public campaign finance program exists, candidates who are running for office and who qualify for the program can receive public funds to cover campaign costs or help cover campaign costs. And then this would help them ideally rely less on larger outside donations. So to give you guys some context, so the state of Florida does regulate campaign financing for statewide office. And, but at the moment, statutes are silent on whether or not local jurisdictions can have publicly funded campaign programs. However, campaigns are regulated to an extent in city and county code. And so some of the examples of what they regulate is contribution limits, financial reporting requirements, and the such. So a bit about why jurisdictions are choosing to incorporate public campaign financing. So we should first consider that publicly funded campaigns are, so first and foremost, there's greater racial and class diversity among donors, as well as an increase in the overall number of donors. More women are ideally encouraged to run for office, and more people in general are encouraged to run for office. Candidates are able to experience more quality time with constituents. There's overall greater voter participation realized by people who do incorporate these programs. Qualified persons are encouraged to seek office who may not otherwise choose to do so. There's a reduced influence of large contributions from businesses, political action groups, and other large organizations. And lastly, you're able to protect the effective competition by candidates using this public campaign program. So to give you guys a general idea of typical costs of running a campaign in Gainesville, I did pull some numbers from the Nassau County Supervisor of Elections website from recent elections and pulled the expenditure numbers from the candidates who were ultimately elected. So the district-wide seat in 2017 saw about $34,000 in expenditures, and the average from the election that year was about $22,700 spent. And the at-large seat, the elected candidates spent about $34,000, and the average for that year was about $35,000. And then the mayoral seat, the elected person spent about $55,000, whereas the average was about $54,000. So to make publicly funded campaigns a reality.
Well, and I'm sorry to interrupt.
Mm-hmm.
I really go through, but for the 2016 mayoral race, there's some hidden figures in there because there was outside money that brought that up over $70,000.
Okay.
That wasn't in, I'm assuming you went to the supervisor elections and looked at campaign reports?
At what candidates spent
Right.
in their reports.
Right, so there's outside spending
Okay.
in that election and others,
Okay.
obviously, that I know brought that well over $70,000. And I'm letting you know that because there's an order of magnitude here. That's a lot of money. Too much? No, that's an editorial.
So to make publicly funded campaigns a reality, it requires determining the structure of the program that the jurisdiction would like to pursue and ensuring that it suits the needs and limitations of any given jurisdiction. So these programs that you have here in this presentation vary in the way that they administer candidate qualification, the way that they distribute funds to candidates, and the way that they assess dollars into the fund. So on here we have the most common three structures which jurisdictions have implemented to provide public campaign funding for candidates. And then on the following slides I'll go into each one, into each structure and jurisdiction to get a little bit of a better understanding of the options. So for instance, the city of Austin, Texas, which is the first city we have up on the slide, they incorporated a grant structure for their program. And then matching funds structure is a more popular option, and that's utilized by cities like Tucson, Arizona, Montgomery County, Maryland, and even the state of Florida has statewide matching funds program. And then the bachelor program is currently utilized by the city of Seattle, Washington. So before I describe each of the program structures, there are a couple common themes amongst each that can be covered. And the first is that almost in all cases, candidates need to raise some threshold number of contributions and also sometimes even a threshold dollar amount of contributions to prove that there's some kind of support from the community in order for them to qualify and receive these public funds in the first place. Then candidates have to adhere to like some established maximum contribution limits, both individually, for instance, you can receive more than 100 to 150 per individual, and then some overall contribution limits that they have to adhere to as well. So in some places, candidates are also limited from receiving funds from organizations and political action committees. As I stated before, this is largely intended to reduce the influence of big dollar contributions for both individuals and large organizations, and keep the focus of candidates on the needs of the local constituents.
Sophia, did you find any examples of jurisdictions that required a certain amount of petitions in lieu of donations to meet the minimum threshold to qualify?
Right, so some of it is just signatures. It's not exactly contributions, but for the most part, but it is small contribution. It could just be like a $10 contribution that they require that you need. But I'll go into that now. And in the report, there's also a number of examples of how they structured it. But I think most generally it's about, let's say, $100.
I kept seeing that word contributions, and I was just wondering if anywhere did it where it wasn't a money thing. It was you were evidencing minimal public support through a number of petitions that you got signed, that kind of thing, like qualifying for the state and county elections, that kind of thing. So anyway.
And so the programs generally tend to include other rules and requirements, like participating in debates, signing agreements to abide by the rules that candidates do not otherwise have to abide by if they're not participating in the program. And then lastly, it's typically required that any unspent funds that are distributed to candidates that aren't used just be returned and go back into that public fund.
It's called a poorly managed and run campaign. You got left over. That's been all.
Okay. So the grant structure. So in this example, basically full funds, like this structure provides full funding for candidates to run their campaigns. And the way it works is that the participating candidates receive a lump sum grant from a public fund. And at that point, no further fundraising is required or allowed, so that every participating candidate has equal resources with which to work with and to campaign. So as I said before, Austin, Texas incorporates a grant structure. They have what's called the Austin Fair Campaign Finance Fund, and this grant-type public campaign financing program has been in place since 1994. And in order for candidates to qualify, they have to sign a campaign contract that requires them to participate in a series of campaign forums, whether or not they qualify for funds. And they must agree to participate in specified debates that are arranged by the city's Ethics Review Commission. And then funds from the program are actually only available to candidates in a runoff election. And so at that point, the candidates receive an equal distribution of the available funds.
So, okay,
Yeah.
let me just understand that.
Yes.
This is all fascinating. So I'm running for office in Austin.
Yes.
Before I get any funds or before I've met the minimum threshold, I sign an agreement that I'm going to participate in certain forums and debates that are run by the city.
Yes.
Okay. But I haven't got any funds yet.
Right.
But if I make it into a runoff, after all that, then I qualify for these
Yes.
funds. Okay.
It's a carrot.
Ethics Review Commission.
Right, yeah. That's just really interesting.
And then in Austin, you only qualify for the funds if there's a runoff.
Right.
So you go through your full election cycle, abiding by these rules, in the hopes that in the event there's a runoff, you'll be able to access the funds.
Well, it's like, one thing that I've heard every candidate that's ever run for office pretty much complain about is the number of different forums hosted by all these like different groups. And wouldn't it be great if they got together and had a couple big forums, that could, really reach a lot of people, but, not just have the people that have already made up their mind. And
Job for the Ethics Commission.
well, it creates an interesting, then candidates would have a reason to say to I'm going to offend somebody, I'll use my own name, the Forest Ridge Neighborhood Association forum, to say, sorry, I can't participate because I'm participating in the Gainesville Neighborhood Alliance forum that's part of this formal city process. It gives some validity to it. So Helen, you wanted to?
Yeah, I was wondering if I missed something, but for like Austin, Texas, they're still able to reach out to their other contacts to get donations too. So this would just be a supplement to the traditional ways that we go fundraising.
Right. In this model.
Were there
Where
any of
Austin
them
does
that said you could only use the public forums?
Yes.
Okay.
So the grant program in Austin receives its funding from the registration fee that is paid by compensated lobbyists, from donations in individuals and business entities, liquidated damages and criminal fines that are collected for violations of campaign contracts, a $1 voluntary donation via checkbox on city utility bills, and all filing fees paid to the city by candidates for the mayor and city council. So the voucher program provides vouchers to registered voters who have applied to the program. Once voters receive their vouchers, they can choose to donate to a specific candidate, and then at that point, the candidate can redeem the voucher and use the funds to help with their campaign costs. So as I said before, Seattle, they have what they call a democracy voucher public finance program. And this is part of their entire Honest Elections Seattle effort. And the way that the program works is that registered voters who are residents of Seattle can apply to the program online, and then in the mail they'll receive 4 separate $25 vouchers. And at that point, the voters have the option of assigning those vouchers to any candidate of their choosing in any amount they choose. So if they see one candidate they really like, they can give 3 vouchers to one, or all 4 to one of them if they choose. And then candidates can accept vouchers up to the established campaign valuation for their seat, and that value is determined based off of the seat they're running for. So in most instances, it will be a little higher for mayor, for at-large, and so forth. It also varies across primary and general elections.
And this is optional. It's optional, right?
What do you mean? Oh, as far as like candidates running?
Yeah, to participate in this.
I think they're all mostly going to be optional because you're going to have to qualify in some sense for it. So for instance, you could be running, and if you want to be eligible to receive these vouchers, you have to prove that through, as I said, most of them, like for instance in Seattle, you have to get, let's say, 100 contributions and $10 or more to be eligible for this. So if you already have that, then I guess in a sense, you'll already qualify. But if you wanted that option to get the voucher, you'd have to make sure you get those qualifying contributions. And then usually there's also some other contracts you sign just to ensure that you're, abiding by any other rules that they have to receive these funds.
And people can choose not to participate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And all those, so the funds for somebody, if I'm a resident, I would apply for a voucher, I'd get like 4 tickets, and I've almost got 4 here. And I would give them to the candidates that I want to support, and all that money comes from property tax. That goes to every household in the city. Are the vouchers given? Well, this is getting pretty deep. We just are looking for. I was wondering if I live in District 2 and I apply for vouchers, then I would have to give them to candidates of District 2, or could I give them to at-larges? And
it's probably also
so that's going maybe too deep. But the primary thing is that it's collected through property tax.
Yeah, that's how they do it there. Yes, I think that's what it was. Yeah, so the program itself is funded by a property tax that costs households about $8 per year. And their program is administered by the Seattle Ethics and Elections Commission. That's what they're called. And the same commission administers Seattle's election campaign code, where the language for the voucher program is discussed. And then lastly, the matching fund structure. And in this option, jurisdictions can match small contributions from voters to qualifying candidates with the use of public funds. In terms of how that fund receives revenue, that varies by jurisdiction. For instance, in Denver, they assess each resident about $2.88 per year. And then in times of fiscal emergency, they suspend or completely reduce that. And then they get funds from other donations and stuff like that. Whereas Tucson, Arizona simply fills their fund with gifts and donations given to the city for that fund specifically, so they don't actually assess any funds, any fees to their residents to participate. So the example we're going to highlight here, is Montgomery County, Maryland, and they have a very well-structured program. And if you refer to the reports that have been given to you, you'll find even more details about that program. It kind of goes on a little bit. But to summarize, the candidates who participate in the public funds program have to meet not only a specific number of qualifying contributions, but qualifying dollar thresholds. And candidates are then limited to receiving individual contributions between $1,500 and $50, and they're not allowed to accept any contributions from organizations or groups. So this includes political action committees, corporations, labor organizations, and so forth. And once candidates have qualified, they can receive matching funds in an amount that is determined by the office they're running for. And then the candidates are limited to a cap on public funds. So this also varies by the office they're running for. So typically at-large and mayor can qualify for a bit more funds than a district seat. And then their fund receives money from the county's general fund each year. So they have people who are assigned to determine how much goes, and each year they kind of go over and assess what money needs to go into the fund. So another thing to note is that the program does have limitations on how funds can be used and dispersed between primary elections and general elections. As I said, they go pretty in-depth, and so more details can be found in the report. But as it stands, a candidate who wins the nomination after receiving county matching funds up to the maximum for the office during the primary can continue to receive matching funds from the county for the general election, but up to the maximum amount for that office for additional qualifying contributions. So some takeaways that were observed when they utilized this program in 2018 was that raising individual contributions from $150 up would be helpful, as some of the candidates didn't even reach the maximum because they found that, even though they got, let's say, a large number of individual contributions, it still wasn't enough to get to that maximum. So let's say, I think for mayor or a county executive, let's say the max was $750,000, a lot of them didn't even reach that because I think they felt limited by how small the individual contributions were. And so there's also rules on donor support between primary and general elections, so they were not allowed to receive donations from people who had supported them in the primary election, and they also found that that was fairly limited. So these were some takeaways from their experience in 2018. So that more or less summarizes the 3 options. And then, to earn ourselves in the policy process as we did earlier, this is phase 2. And so if the committee wishes to proceed with this idea, then that item would be assigned to the created charter officer for phases 3 and beyond. So I can definitely take any questions.
H-Dub, you want to fix it there?
That's true.
That's true.
Makes it really hard on.
Right.
I know.
As we were going through this process, and we started conversations about this with the policy office 7 or 8 months ago, I think. And I found it really interesting to look at the way different municipalities approach this. Some of it is kind of fanciful. I too love the idea of saying, if you're going to take the money, you have to agree to show up at these forums and not the others. Period. That's it. That's a dream world kind of situation, but I like doing the forums. It's just, man, you talk to the same group of people over and over and over and over and over and over.
And sometimes they're when city commission has meetings a year. So.
Yes, they do occasionally do
That's
that.
problematic.
So the one that I'm most interested in, the model that I like the most, obviously the dollar figures change because there's a very different population, but Montgomery County, Maryland, I really like that. I kept going back to that system. It requires you to go raise some money to qualify. But it gives you enough money once you get that threshold to run a campaign. And it doesn't presume that campaigns will suddenly get cheaper because there's public financing available. You still have to mail things out to people. You still have to reach out to voters and get your message out there. But it gives you resources to be able to do that. And that's all scalable to a Gainesville level, I think. And obviously there's a different need for district elections, at-large elections, and mayoral elections. An interesting thing to me about the presentation that I really wanted to point out is this follows our recent move to August elections. We're going to have more people participating in the process. So the number that was most accurate was that I think that 2016 mayoral election is a better target numbers-wise, number of voters, than our average March elections. We're going to have more people participating in the process. We're going to need to be able to reach more people. Whoever's running is going to need to be able to reach more people than we do. It's not going to be, we're not going to have any of those district elections where you only need to talk to 2,000 people. That hasn't been the past. That's also going to make elections more expensive, so we need to be aware of that. So that 2016 election is a really good marker, I think. And the upcoming election will be similar because it's presidential preference primary. More people are going to be at the polls than would be in your average March election. So that's a better marker for what we're going to see going forward. At any rate, I would like us to do a deeper dive on this. I'm not ready to make a motion. I want to hear what everybody else has to say. But I really like that Montgomery County approach, and I'm very interested in what you all have to say, because you've all done this.
First, I just want to acknowledge Mr. Mayor, someone who's experienced more elections than maybe all of us combined. I can tell that there's a joy in the conversation, in the comments that you've made so far. So we're looking forward to hearing more of your wisdom. I want to know, does Florida law have any preemptions about this?
So one thing that, sort of backing up a bit, one thing that Sophia referenced but didn't delve into is that Florida, on the state level, we have a public financing program for statewide office, for the governor, for attorney general, and for a few other seats. So it exists already in the state of Florida and has since the 80s. There are, though, no other municipalities that we could find that had it, and we weren't sure if that was because of preemption or because no one else has just jumped into these waters. Ms. Shalley's office has looked into it and has not, let me know if I'm speaking for you inaccurately, has not found anything dispositive yet, and will continue looking. Or, no.
Should I stay here and speak?
Why don't you come?
Okay.
Yes, so I think the issue for the commission, because as Lindsay correctly stated, there is no other local government in Florida that's done something like this. And I think that's because it's not entirely clear whether you can or can't. But I think what you all have to do, and in order for us to try to figure that out or to seek an AGO opinion, and there's some conflicting AGO opinions and conflicting Division of Elections opinions, and there's no case that's decided this sort of thing, you all need to figure out what it is you want to do so we could pose the question perhaps to the Attorney General's office or get comfortable ourselves by looking at piecing together as best we can what little bit of conflicting law is out there. But I think you really need to decide the parameters of the you need to get some degree of specificity in order for us to be able to do that.
Thank you. Just initially off the bat, I'm really not sure how supportive I would be of us going in this direction. There's so many details that would need to be sorted out that, you know, to be frank, I just think us as a body, we're not really fit to be the final arbiter on how much money a candidate should receive and what's the threshold for filing and receiving the public dollar. I mean, this is a big lift. If we go through this, what they said, we're going to be the only city in Florida going forward. All eyes are going to be on us. This is going to be and that's not a problem. But my point is the amount of capital that this commission, the amount of work that we're trying to get done, adding this onto it is going to expend a lot of capital that we are using quite generously. So I don't know if this is the right direction for us to go. I'm going to take a lot of convincing. Getting on board.
Yeah, so to your point, I ask what problem does it solve? It still doesn't, unless we can put a cap on how much somebody can raise. The other side of it is we're looking, what I hear is that there's a benefit to help an individual who can make a certain threshold to have more money available. But it doesn't stop the ability for an individual to raise the funds and continue to raise the funds. And I think part of the process, as much as I hated asking people for money, but the process of reaching out for that really put me in the community conversation more to reach out to constituents. It was almost, I hate to say that the money helps identify the votes, but there is that. And yeah, if I could see an example of where somebody didn't raise their own money and or could use one of these programs and were able to get elected. To me, again, I will come back to what is the problem that this will solve? It's a speculation, and it's using public funds for something that otherwise, I hate that we spend so much on contributions that couldn't be, people would put that money into public good somehow. But it doesn't do that either. So I don't hear a problem that convinces me that this is going to solve it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The problem I think that it solves is that it's much, 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 much easier to run if you have a network of wealthy friends who can fund your campaign. My first ran for office was a long time ago. Ran for office, lost, but that was one of my concerns of not knowing enough wealthy people who could. I didn't have that kind of group of wealthy friends. My two other candidates who I was running against did. They did have much larger kind of reaches in those. So I think that is the problem to solve. It's ensuring that everyone can have a chance to run. Yes, they can still outraise you and they can still spin 4 to 1.
Yeah.
But you need just enough to be able to run a real campaign. And that's where I think that we're trying to do is to ensure that if you get enough donors, then you can run a real campaign. And yes, you can get outspent, and I'm not trying to stop that from happening, but I think going towards the matching program, I think Montgomery about a move of that. I don't know if we can, or do $6 for every 2 or whatever is like on things, but I think looking at only matching contributions from City of Gainesville residents, having to meet a certain threshold of donors and dollars to show that you can raise at least some, that there is some community backing for you. I also think that if people do take these public dollars, that it should be a restriction that you cannot receive money from political committees, or political action committees or businesses.
I like that idea.
And there should be a max amount. So there is a cap on what we, as a city government coffers, have that we'll spend. So we know we're not going to spend above that amount. And then the other thing is we make sure we don't include like money that their individual candidate gives, like that can get matched too. Like if you give yourself a $2,000 loan, that can't be matched. So I'm supportive of us exploring more and looking deeper into it. I think it would be good. I think it would help even the playing field. And I agree, elections are going to get more expensive. They're not going to get cheaper as we move into the fall elections. And with our caps at $250, that makes it somewhat difficult. We're going to be running into more issues, I think, and not having enough money to be able to communicate to everyone that's necessary. On the other note, too, we talked about petitions. That's one of the things that I've asked policy staff to look into, is having petitions in lieu of qualifying fees, doing something similar to what the county and the school board do. I think there's been issues in the past few years in that. I think we should look at that, but that'll be coming at a later date. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Harvey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There are maybe 3 or 4 people that I have ever talked to about politics who did not say somewhere in the conversation, we need to get money out of politics. It has to start somewhere. We all know that if you run for, in Gainesville, it's not that much money to raise, if you know how to do it. If you don't know how to do it, we don't know how many people have that would have been very good commissioners have just dismissed the idea out of hand and said, I am not going to go try to raise $30,000. Not going to do it. How many great commissioners have we missed because of that? We'll never know. But given that every single person who talks about politics on both sides of the aisle says we need to get money out of politics, unless there's somebody who benefits from bringing money into politics, it has to start somewhere. And no, it's nowhere else in Florida, but it has to start somewhere. And there's probably the reason it is because when people sit around and think about, well, how would we do it? It's complicated, we don't have time for it. That's where the conversation ends, I'm guessing. But as far as us being qualified, we have to be qualified. Our charter says that we're responsible for our elections. We are the authority. The sitting city commission in any given year is responsible for it. So yes, we're qualified. The voters put us here as part of that responsibility. And yes, if we pass something like this, we would be in a fishbowl. But we're Gainesville. We're supposed to do that. We're supposed to reach out and work a little bit harder and set examples. There's no question in my mind that there are people who don't run for office because they don't have the Rolodex. We all know that. It should not be a qualification to run for office. If you have good ideas and you understand government and you don't mind knocking on doors and talking to people about what is the change you want to make, you ought to have that opportunity. It ought to be a relatively successful opportunity. Now, it is not always true that the person who raises the most money is going to win. Absolutely not. But there is a threshold you have to meet to be able to win, because you have to do something to get your message out there. You can't knock. As much as I like to walk, I can't knock on the doors of all 24, 25, 26, 20,000 voters in District 2. I can't do it. So it costs money to get the message out there. I think, well, I told you which one I'm most interested in, but I want to see what it would look like for Gainesville. I want us to spend a little time thinking about this, and it doesn't have to be right now. heck, a good approach might be to, for it not to come back till after this session is over, so we can't get preempted on it right away. Then we could end up grandfathered in if they did do something next session. But I really think we would be doing a disservice not to give some thought and a little effort to this. Yes, it's hard. Good things are hard. Maybe it's a waste of time, but Lord knows we have wasted time on other things that weren't particularly useful to the community. I think this is useful to the community. I think we're not the first ones. It works in other communities around the country, and I think it's worth spending a little time and effort on.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. My thoughts aren't entirely clear about this, so I just want you all to roll with me on this. Because my mind is really open right now, and I'm thankful that you brought this up. It's a really good conversation and definitely worthy of considering. So what we're trying to do is lower the barriers for people to become involved in politics, right? And also keep money out of politics. And a couple of questions I have. I would like to understand, in all these cities, has it worked? Because there are a couple of things. One, if we're going to level the playing field, then we're going to have to do it with everyone. So to me, if we were to consider this, it would have to be a mandatory, and I don't even know if it's legal, but it would have to be something that everybody would agree to be a candidate. Like, you just can't raise money outside. Like, this is the amount of money that you get, work with it. Okay. Another thought that I have is that people are really creative, and that there will always be ways to get around this. So I want to be intentional about figuring out the ways that people will get around this, because maybe we're going to do all this work and then some way it's going to be for nothing because people have gotten around it. I think there are different layers to this. So this is one layer that we're peeling back, but I think we also need to look at the other layers in order for us to really get at solving the problem that we're trying to solve, right? So it's not just getting the job, it's getting the job and keeping the job. There's low pay. Many people just can't afford to do this job, right? So yeah, you can get in here, but are you gonna stay? There's that piece of it too. We need to examine that. I just wanted to talk about the money helps to identify the votes. That is really true. And that is why we are in the situation that we're in this country. So this is about not just the money, but let's talk about resources, right? And I think we've got to quantify that, because sometimes you cannot pay for the amount of resources, meaning people knocking on doors and other things that people will bring to your election to win. So yeah, it might not be about the money, but it might be about the 20 people that you have knocking on doors for you. So then how are we going to adjust for that? And is that something that we should be thinking about adjusting for, right? And I'm thinking about, specifically, I was looking at the research that you did, and I was thinking about Seattle, right? And Seattle just went through a huge issue with their last election, where Amazon just put $1.4 million and tried to buy an election, right? But they still have this program. So are we really solving the problems that we're trying to solve? So I think in order for me to understand if I want to go in this direction, I need to know, one, does it work? What have been the outcomes of, like, let's say the last 5 elections where people have participated with public funds and people that have not participated, and did money really buy it? I happen to think the money can buy elections, I do. I think that you can buy elections. I think that you are just it's amazing. You're just amazing. And other people that manage to do that, money can't buy elections. That's how I feel. So I need to understand what the data is about that. And I also want to make sure that we are identifying all the issues that we are trying to solve within this to make sure that if we just peel back this layer, are we really doing anything? That's it, thanks. I think I was pretty clear, right? Wow. I was impressed with myself.
You might have some parrot in you, thinking while you, looking at as you talk. I paid attention at that thing. I
Call you an owl.
I very much want to continue looking at this. The biggest problem we have with government politics in our country is money, hands down. And we, because we run our own elections, have some ability to address that. And so but it's complicated. And so, you know, I'm just looking at case precedent. And the Supreme Court, for quite some time, with very different compositions, has continuously kind of come back to money as a form of speech, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they did that in Buckley Vallejo. They definitely did that in Citizens United. So I think it gets interesting where if we get to the point where we're not allowing people to participate in elections by not allowing them to use their money to voice their views, we're going to get in trouble. Now, I don't know, like, because despite there being jurisdictions that have done this, it's still a very small sample size, you know, overall. And in a lot of I mean, you've got to have someone challenge it, right? So, you know, until it like gets to be a mainstream thing, some of these groups might say, oh, let Tucson do their thing and whatever, Seattle, we don't care, you know. So we probably fall into this category. Oh, Gainesville, whatever. They're so crazy and socialist. You know, but I guess because I'm remembering because you spoke last, Gail, but you know, I think making sure that what we're doing is going to achieve the goals that we're setting out to do, and that's the process. Now, as far as timeline, like I think I wouldn't want to see this really go into effect until we finally move to elections. And I mean, I think that matches up well if we do this. So this next round of elections, which will be your seat in District 1, you know, keep things the way they are. And that gives us some time and, you know, I mean, a decent amount of time for legal to do their thing, for research to do their thing, for, you know, us to really look at alternatives. But, you know, after all is said and done, I think that we get better elections, better pool of candidates, better public conversations if we even the playing field. That would be my goal. That would be my goal. And so I agree with you on the point that I don't think it should be voluntary. And that's where it might get into legal trouble. But if somebody, I mean, we've seen this with the presidential elections. The last person to take public financing for presidential elections was John McCain, and it was a massive strategic mistake. Massive. Yeah, Barack Obama went and outraised him 2-1, and I mean, he just got steamrolled. You remember that? I'm just kidding. But in that election, Barack Obama had so much money, he ran a half-an-hour infomercial on primetime television, like a couple days before the election, when it was unnecessary. I mean, but he had all this money. He's like, oh, I'll just get some TV time on major networks like 3 days before the election, since I've already won this thing. You know, and so it doesn't work because you can opt in. You know, and now every candidate says, I'm going to have to raise $1 billion anyway. I can't opt into this, or I just won't be able to compete. So one thing for me is, like, if we're going to do this, it should truly even the playing field, which, you know, makes me, you know, I go back to my first election, and so I'd worked on a couple local elections, and then I'd gone to like a candidate training thing that at the time was called Move On. It's Howard Dean's sort of legacy that, you know, did candidate training stuff. And, you know, it's like, well, what you do is you get out your, I think at the time they called them Rolodexes, but, you know, you get out your contact list and you call your friends and your family and, you know, people that, you know, that own businesses and stuff. And so I did that, and 5 minutes later, I was done, you know, because I'm a teacher, right? And I'm like, I don't know any people with money. Like, it was impossible for me. I really had no clue as to, like, how I start. And I didn't raise very much money that, you know, fortunately it was a district race, and I didn't raise much money. So, you know, I think if we develop something that truly does even the playing field, that encourages and allows a greater diversity of candidates to get in, and that everybody knows, you know, you have whatever the number is, $30,000 to work with, and if you want to spend it all on TV, spend it all on TV. If you want to hire a bunch of people to help you go door to door, then do that, whatever it is, but it's your money, and that's all there is. That to me leads to the best outcome. But that's where I'm today. I don't want to pretend like I'm not married to any of those things. I just have a core belief that money is a corrupter of good campaigns and good government, and if we can do something to reduce or eliminate that corruption, then we have better city government. Now, the other thing that I love that we haven't talked about, but I love how Great Britain does it, where you're not even allowed to raise a dime or campaign or even say you're campaigning until I think it's 8 weeks. I think they have it's a time before election day. And so basically once that, you know, let's say it's 8 weeks out, it's furious, but it's
contained.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I don't know if y'all ever saw the footage at San Diego a couple Independence Days ago. All of their fireworks went off at the same time. So it was like 10 seconds of phenomenal glory, and then it was done. Look it up on YouTube, it's amazing.
I kind of like it spread out, though.
No, everyone does.
Not the campaign.
The poor spectators are like, whoa!
They got 3 hours to practice it.
Right, exactly. They planned the whole evening around. But yeah, I mean, I think that would be something interesting to talk about. Like, you know, here's when you're allowed to start, and then, you know, that way everyone's focused on it. The media, the forums, it's all right there, and you don't get that sort of voter fatigue that you get from the endless, like, constant cycle. I know y'all run and, you know, you're trying to, like, talk to people in October or whatever, like, can you call me back in March or whatever. So, I mean, I'm just throwing that out there that it is the way things work in other places, and there is, I think, a value to that. But again, I'm in no rush. I think we slow walk this one and really take our time to look at different alternatives. And I agree with, I think what I've heard from several people is, I'd like to see some outcomes, like what the before and after, and, you know, did voter participation go up? Did, you know, I know, like, Seattle has a pretty good diversity of people, like, they elect non-Democrats and Republicans to their commission. And I don't think that's really possible in a lot of places that don't have public financing. You know, I mean, when you open it up like that, I think you get people that might be, you know, true independents or Green Party members or libertarians or Democratic Socialists or whatever. When you give them equal footing, you know, they compete on ideas, not just money and sort of institutionalized support. So that's all a way of saying that I'm definitely supportive of moving this forward, but without putting a lot of brackets around it. Yeah.
So I would like the direction that this is going, and, you know, and what would be interesting is to have a workshop or time as general policy where we discuss, you know, identify what the problems are, other than, you know, the top dollar, just so much money going into it, and identify options to, you know, I think it's important. Yeah, there's a lot of individuals who are out there that could be good candidates, and they haven't stepped into the competition or to the process. But I wonder if there's something, you know, part of that process is getting out there and talking to people, you know, doing the one-on-one contacts, the door knocking, and wondering if there isn't something of a threshold to help identify who are the choice of the word, you know, a question mark, you know, not viable, but who are serious candidates that have support for the view. I mean, the whole thing about a democracy is not that it's just two parties, but there are groups of people who support different services and actions and policies that they want to get done. It does fall back to being pretty much a Democratic Republican partisan process, but we need to get, like for me, when I ran the first time, there was a campaign manager who knew how to put me in the motion of knocking on the doors and where I needed to be, because I had the whole city as a first touch, and you know, it was that difficult thing about building support and raising money. Is this process going to stop? Put a ceiling in place. So what I would be wondering about, one of the questions for the staff to look at is when they're looking at what the before and after voter participation was when the policy change went in. Also, you know, when there are public funds towards a campaign, is there a ceiling on the total amount that somebody collects for their campaign treasure chest? With this public support going in, did there seem to be a drop in? I mean, I just can't imagine that there will be individuals that aren't going to continue to do contributions to people, and so does it really stop the flow, the hemorrhaging of money to candidates? If it doesn't, then, you know, there's another, it's not solving the problem. And would wonder if there's other ways to allow an individual who wants to run. You know, we have to get better at supporting people because we are term limited. And we need to get better at supporting individuals to come from watching these meetings to feeling comfortable and to know that there are people who are standing behind you to go forth. And that's basically what allowed me to step up, was that there are people who stood behind me to say, well, we're here to support you. Then when it was like, this is the money you have to raise, that was kind of like, I was ready to walk away from the process. But by then I was already engaged and felt that this is my civic duty. You know, somebody needs to step up. And I felt that I would have the personality and the judgment to fill this spot well. So those are the two concerns that I have with public support, but then to also look at what are the problems that we have that we want to solve. How can we set some policy that says, you know, there's a point to which having the petition signed helps identify that there are really people here to support that individual. And I don't know what we would set as a number for petitions, but I don't know how else to establish a threshold. You've got support, you've got ideas, and I think that's really important somehow to get individuals vetted. You know, it's kind of, but I feel like we need to have a better conversation, put more time to talk about what are the problems we're trying to solve, and how do we support the people in the community, other than just public support. There needs to be the democracy of people supporting each other to go to the meetings, to run.
Yeah, I'm never here next, but
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's data out there already for some of these. I'm sure they've been studied to death, several of them. I'm not going to make a motion yet because I looked here for the public first, but I would, any motion I made would include that we ask people who have been candidates in publicly funded elections to maybe call in the next time we have this discussion and ask staff to coordinate some of that. I'm sure it's possible. We were talking about municipal folks, they'll do it. So, and as far as a number of petitions that we might look at on a separate topic there, the county standard is 1% of the voters in whatever it is you're running for. So in District 2, I would need, 250 or so petitions, which is totally doable. As somebody who has run for a petition-oriented office before, it's not the most fun thing in the world, but
It gets you out there.
yeah, and it gets you out there better and differently than raising money does.
Yeah.
It's an entirely different thing.
It's not a bad thing.
Right, it's not sitting in a room with a phone. You have to actually get in front of people to do it.
And they're going to ask you, what do you want?
So, yeah, I think that's a very useful thing. Anyway, I look forward to hearing what the few remaining folks here from the public have to say about it when we get to.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We might be able to change when people can actually campaign, because I think we set like when people can qualify for an election. I don't know, I'd probably get a lawsuit at some point.
I'm glad you
yeah. But as far as putting a cap on like, you can only spend $30,000 or whatever it is, and that's all you can do, I'm pretty sure it's unconstitutional, and I also think I don't think it's really fair. I think it helps incumbents a lot more than it helps someone who's running for office, because now you're exactly even. The incumbent usually has a lot more name recognition.
But not an advantage in Gainesville.
Right? Yeah. And I also think forcing people into it is going to be unconstitutional as well. I'm pretty positive with our Supreme Courts and that money is talk, but hopefully I think we can do a volunteer program. That's what all the other ones are voluntary programs. The other, thank you.
Well, I don't have a whole lot to say. I guess I just want to say that I've not really been terribly convinced by it. I mean, I'm interested in keeping the conversation going, but I mean, nobody can tell me what a real campaign is, and or what can they spend that money on if we're going to give them $10,000, $15,000, $20,000. And we can't restrict people's spending. So this is really for the candidate. If the premise is we want more people who are not, financially well off and in a nice little network of wealthy contributors, they're still going to collect that money and they're going to throw this on top of it.
Yeah, that's my word.
So I don't look. I realize how this is sounding, and I should probably preface with saying we need to overturn Citizens United and all of that.
Right.
And money is not speech, but we cannot electioneer in a vacuum. We can change our rules here in Gainesville and offer public elections, but we're still in Alachua County. We're still in the state of Florida. County Commission's not going to adopt this. They're not. So.
I'm not sure of that at all.
Well, that's fair, and I don't mean to speak for them.
But what is it going to solve?
I just don't know that this is going to. So I'll use a logical phrase. The phrase has been said many times. If we make public funding elections, we will get better candidates and better commissioners. That's not necessarily true. It will provide a sufficient sum for potentially better commissioners, better candidates, more commissioners. But it's not necessarily true. And so I think that we just, again, I just want to make sure that what we're actually doing is going to accomplish the goal that we're setting forth. And there's for publicly financed elections, I'm in favor of it at the national and the state level when we're talking ridiculous sums of money. But for our city elections, I got it.
Yeah, I just feel like this, with the discussion about this isn't going to be something we're really going to want to do much with until more than a year down the road. I feel that staff time has got other things that we're working on, and I would table this to a later date.
Okay.
I'd make the motion to table it to a later date.
Is there a second? Members of the public want to speak to this item? Welcome.
My name is Gabe Kinowitz. I'm a candidate qualified for Gainesville City Commission at large, CA, according to your ordinance, C2, according to the state, according to the county. I feel that I'm in Never Never Land or Mars or someplace, but I'm certainly on a different planet from you all. I will be spending a maximum of $2,000. I do expect to influence the outcome of this election because I will be supporting one of the other candidates. You're talking in a vacuum. Why? Number one, this is a city that's unusual in running so-called nonpartisan elections, so that you're all seven members of the Alachua County Democratic Executive Committee, which would be an issue if people understood that there were politics involved. So you don't deal with politics. I was a campaign advisor in 1972. My son was a campaign manager in the same year. He was 14. My ex was the candidate. She finished third, but totally disrupted the election, which was the attention. She ran as a Human Rights Party candidate, a third party. This took place in 1972. In 1995, the Smithsonian held that election out as a quintessential example of democracy in the United States. What's wrong here? You're not even beginning to consider students. We exclude 50,000 students. Our mayor won, and this doesn't mean to be insulting at all. He got less than 10% of the votes, not the 13, 16 of what was claimed. What he won were people who voted for him. That's the key. What I'm saying to you, this process is so distorted, you couldn't even begin to change it with public funding. And the public funding, I would agree, would clearly make it worse. Why? I'm not a qualified candidate in my mind. Who is? Gary Gordon. How was he excluded? It was incredible. He didn't have to write check. I'm still outraged by that. He should be on that ballot. You'd have a better election. One last point, I'll shut up. You all are blind to what you don't want to see. The mayor commented on the forums that were raised. Notice that Austin also makes sure you have to qualify with debates. This city never heard of debates for local elections. That's crazy. I would run a real race if there were debates. I can't do anything. Plus, you have a newspaper that's incredible compared to those in Seattle. I don't know about, well, Montgomery County says Washington Post, Baltimore, whatever. All I'm saying to you, the condition.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Jason Foltz. I'm sorry, I never triple dip in one meeting, but today's agenda is like my jam. It really is. I had to say this. And I've got so much I want to say on this topic, but I'm going to be as concise as I can. So first off, ditto everything I said earlier on the ethics piece. I think that everything I said then absolutely applies to this conversation, and it's really important. A local data point that I'd be interested in seeing from the folks that have been looking at supervisor of election stuff is how many times in local elections has a candidate that spent the most money won. And I know that local elections are somewhat a different dynamic, but I heard a person on NPR the other night that's like an expert in this field, and the vast majority of the time in other elections, the person that spends the most money wins, which is just crazy to me. And it comes back to exactly what so many of you have talked about. I know personally, one of the main reasons that I have never thought about running for public office is because I don't have the kind of folks in my Rolodex. The idea of raising that kind of money is just incredibly intimidating to me. I'm probably not one of those great city commissioners that you've missed out on, but there are a lot of people that come from the class background that I do that are incredibly intimidated at running and making that kind of a monetary run, basically. One of the things I do want to point out, and I don't know if the program was ended or just hasn't been successful enough to be talked about, but the city of Tallahassee did pass a public finance program back in 2014. And so it would be worth looking at that program and what the track record has been and if that has been successful. And I have more information on that if you need it. And then lastly, I do agree absolutely with what everybody has said about how potentially complicated this is, and you don't want to get it wrong. You want to make sure that it actually addresses the problems that you're setting out to address. And so some questions I would have, and there has been academic writing that has been done on these programs around the country and their effectiveness. So when we say effectiveness, how have they actually influenced the dynamics of money in a race? Like, that's an important question. Have they opened doors to people that more traditionally are underrepresented in public office? Have they boosted participation or other things? Those are kinds of questions we have to answer. But I think that those questions really should be looked at, and this conversation should continue. And I hope that rather than just tabling this and walking away from it, you all will at least take some next step forward in terms of taking a look more at this issue. I think it's super important. So, thank you.
Very good, thanks. Anybody else here to talk on this topic? Okay, back to the commission. Harvey?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that we direct staff to explore what a campaign public finance system might look like for Gainesville elections, including fiscal and other impacts. For this concept, move to phases 3 and 4, the timeline development and full staff analysis phases of our policy process, and that we direct staff to invite candidates who have participated in these kind of elections in various other cities to be a part of the next discussion that we have.
Second.
Any motion second? Any further questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That motion passes unanimously. We have Commissioner Simmons absent. Okay, next item is general public comment.
I'm a one-issue candidate in this coming election. You can see by that flyer, and I'd appreciate if Commissioner Warren would pass around or make sure that, every one of the sitting commissioners gets that comment. It's simply a campaign to make Gainesville Butterfly City again. I'll take full responsibility for having caused the take down of the signs and the like. The reason I started to run and the reason I want this issue is so important is that on the internet in October, a Labour Party MP in the United Kingdom advocated being the first butterfly city in the world. And she was going to start, she is starting, by planting 3,000 trees and coming up with certification criteria. You look on the internet, and what confounds her claim is that we're still listed as the first butterfly city. Chamber of Commerce, on its guide, annual guide in 2018 and 19, continues to list as its primary quality of life award the butterfly city connotation. The Labour Party candidate beat the odds in Brexit vote and has been re-elected. Her name is Emma Harding. I would like to get far enough to get to a sister city relationship. And I want to apprise you, by the way, why this issue is so important. Because of a very self-effacing curator of collections at the Museum of Natural History, Tropical Butterfly Garden, McGuire Center. He has caused the planting of butterfly gardens at almost every elementary and most secondary schools, not just in Gainesville, but in Alachua County. That's going on. You promote butterfly garden, you get kids interested in pollination, the whole crisis about bees and the like. That we get over personalities, you should want it as much as anything. In fact, I will say this, if you can vote and approve it before the election, I will withdraw. I've offered the other candidate, I will support any candidate who comes forward to support this simple idea. Whatever it was, as I say, I'll take responsibility. I triggered what happened. I didn't expect the result. I got a result I certainly didn't want. But I'm saying to you and stressing to you, I will be repeating this over and over again, because this can put us on a map, an international map, 2 first butterfly cities, kids in pen pal relationships between the United Kingdom and here.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell.
Thank you.
Anybody else here for general public comment? Okay, we'll close this portion of general public comment, move on to member comment. Commissioner Warren.
Yeah, I appreciate what, the comments that was just said, and just wanted to relate that I have been discussing climate change with people in a lot of different venues, and our tree canopy, and making an extension of the tree canopy conversation to include our understory and the importance of that. And I would be supportive to carry the discussion about Butterfly City at our next meeting. As an Audubon person and the climate change, I'd like to start with a new fresh 2020 agreement, recognition that butterflies are good and this city can be good to them. And we already are with our museum of actual live butterflies in a museum where there's usually dead things. They're very proud of that point. So I will carry the flag.
Commissioner Ward?
Was that a motion?
Well, no, because it's not on the agenda and it's just a topic.
Yeah, I'm interested in having the discussion. We pulled it the last time because we were threatened with being sued over the logo.
Right. We might get a new logo.
Yeah. All right, so a motion that I do want to make, I've been talking with staff about some confusion, not confusion, that's not the right word. We've had discussion at the commission, and staff has had discussion about boards and about getting some clarity on what our boards do and what our board processes are. I move that we schedule, staff schedule a workshop to discuss boards. I want to go on the floor.
Okay, is there a second? Second. There's a second to ask clerk's office to schedule a city workshop to discuss our advisory boards. Any members of the public? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? That motion passes. It's the only item. Okay. Who else?
Do we need more specificity? Do we need more specificity?
Oh, we already did a workshop.
They brought it to me.
Was there another member comment?
Yeah, I'll make I'd like to say that we started talking a little bit about this in the Race and Equity Committee, so I'm wondering if we can fold some of those same issues into this discussion.
About the boards?
Yeah.
So I'd say at your next Race and Equity Subcommittee meeting, bring it up and talk about how your needs can fit into that workshop. Okay, let's see if there's any other, sorry, I just wanted to thank Officer Martinez for spending the afternoon with us and keeping the people's call safe and hospitable to everybody. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.